really collation rather than a re-articulation. For instance, the Factories Act, 70% of all the imprisonment clauses that I was talking about earlier reside in the Factories Act, Minimum Wages Act. There are these some of them are very ridiculous. Perhaps those reforms will happen through Jan Vishwas 2, Jan Vishwas 3, Jan Vishwas 4. So maybe labor reforms will be reformed from the outside rather than by calling them or terming them some mega labor reforms. And the last thing which I hope, but I don't know how this will go, is government should stop getting bullied by state power, by street power. I think if there is a policy, it needs to be debated, and it needs to come down hard on any law and order breach, and I mean any law and order breach, be it farm laws, be it CAA, be it anything.
Do you see these big ticket reforms coming through in the third term?
I have a slightly different view. I think that the BJP wants to position itself as the default party of governance until it doesn't actually win majorities in predominant number of states. Look, fundamentally,
they're already in power in like 17 states.
Fundamentally, Zaka, the South is not with the BJP right now.
Sure.
Some of the most significant states on the eastern coast are not with the BJP right now. What it can do with numeric strength, it is already in a position to do. It has a majority in the Lok Sabha. Through various ministrations, it manages the majority in the Rajya Sabha. I think it comes down to intent, and intent can only come when you realize that you have been able to touch and win the confidence of a bulk of voters. We are talking about very significant shifts which will, through these labor laws, if they were, through land laws, these are laws that touch the daily existence of people. Of
your voters.
Not just that. See, remember that every single thing that Gautam talked about are actually state subjects. Whether it's farm, whether it's land, whether it's labor, they're all concurrent. No, most of them are, but in the sense that at the end of the day, the states still have to implement. It's a labor code. So the state still has to enact it. So the state has a large...
Just give me a moment. I'll come back to the guests here. Just give me 1 second. Ashish Bhutani, CEO of Bhutani Group, is now joining us. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhutani. You know, our guests in the studio were talking about land reform, labor reform. One area where there's been some degree of reform with RERA and others coming in is in real estate. What is the barometer in real estate right now? Because people are saying, you know, we're seeing, you know, pockets of growth in the big cities, but beyond that, we're not seeing. There's also the view that for the large parts of middle class, it's become unaffordable. And yet at the same time, for the poorer sections, and this is one area where you have to give credit to the Modi government, for the poorer sections, PM Awas has built record number of homes. So how would you stack where real estate is at the moment here in India?
See, very honestly, I'd like to draw a very quick comparison. China last year, 30% of entire country's GDP came from real estate. That accounts 30%. I think it is the strongest sector in the world right now. It's more than 1.5 times of the Indian economy. As you correctly said, the PM Awas has shown staggering numbers and it will continue to do the same. But very honestly, our expectation right now from the budget is one single window clearance, and the second most requirement that comes now is PPP projects. I think what China successfully did was implement a number of PPP like mega projects. For example, the film city that just recently came in, and with God's grace, we won it as well. So similar such projects need to come in for entire India, and that will really propel the growth for the entire country.
But isn't there a fear, since you used the China example, the other big story that's come from there is one of their biggest real estate developers, Evergrande, has filed for insolvency. So there is also, and especially with real estate, there is this fear of when will the bubble burst?
See, very honestly, I know they were the second largest developers in China, and there are bad apples everywhere. But they had a debt of more than $300 billion. That's more than the entire debt of Sweden, to be very honest, comparative in the real estate sector. So that sort of exposure for a single developer had staggering impact on the entire economy. There needs to be, yes, government interference on the amount of debt a developer via obviously debt to equity ratio that needs to be maintained for any developer that the government should monitor. I 100% agree on that. But given the fact the amount of turnover they did in 2018, if you talk about Evergrande, their turnover was more than the top 50 developers in India in the same year.
Okay.
Combined.
All right. One final word. There used to be a time not so long ago where people were talking about, real estate is the den of all black money. You want to make your black money into white, that's where you go. But with RERA and others coming in, do you see that changing? Do you see a more structure and corporatization of real estate coming through, and therefore it's now much more of the genuine buyers who are coming into this rather than the speculators?
See, one thing I'll like to quickly draw upon. I was in fact recently talking to a very, very seasoned professional. In UP, if you get a RERA number now successfully, trust me, it's even earlier. I'll draw a very quick comparison. People used to say if there is a loan available on the property, then you know that the property is clean. Now, I think with UP RERA especially, if you get a RERA in UP, your property is cleaner than even a bank's go ahead. That's how difficult it is to get a RERA now. Yes, you are right to an extent. The speculators have gone, but investors to a certain degree will always be involved in real estate, especially in the commercial real estate segment, which in fact I think is very necessary as well. That supports both the developers and the country.
All right, Mr. Bhutani, thank you very much for joining us. Is real estate a marker of where an economy stands? And if it is, then where does the Indian economy stand? Like Mr. Bhutani said, 30% of China's economy comes from their cities. They have, 150, 200 cities which have more than 1 million people?
Definitely, real estate is a marker of, which way the economy is going. Also, how much people are earning. When you buy a house, and it's an asset. So when
it's also a sign of confidence, right?
That's right. So when you buy a house, it is the key determinant of that decision is not your current income. It's your what you think about your ability to fund this asset over a 15-year period. So what do you think about your future income, and that works at the psychological level too.
Value can only be unlocked when there is demand for it, when there are enough people who have the disposable incomes to buy. To invest.
Enough people. See, in 2015, real estate was 5% of GDP. Today, it's 8.7%. And that's a huge number on a rising GDP. So I think that confidence that you're talking about in real estate is there, definitely. In fact, real estate is one of the closest investing asset classes of Indians because firstly, you get to live there. And secondly, they think there is some form of stability and long-term
on the other hand, my point is if you look around, there is a huge demand-supply mismatch.
Exactly.
You look around you, anecdotally, you look at your greater Noidas, you look at certain other places, you have huge supply, there's no demand. So the question also behooves as to why there is that demand supply.
Consumption, demand, private consumption contributes 61% to GDP. That's where we have our biggest problem in the economy.
Even with your real estate, with your interest rates being what they are, they're not particularly cheap, but they're reasonable. Yeah. So with what it is, why is it that people are not buying? What is happening there? And also look at, forget the real estate sector in terms of what houses are being built, but look at profitability of real estate companies. They're still struggling, right, in terms of what has happened with post-COVID, with all of that, with sales stalled. It's still problematic. They will come out. RERA's played a very important role.
No, but when you talk about, infrastructure spending, and we've talked about this in great detail, 10 lakh crores building highways and ports and bridges, real estate, private real estate is also have to sort of keep up pace with that. It can't just be the government is going on steroids and the private guys are still, with their walking sticks.
No, but there is also, sorry, just one second. But there is a problem in terms of when the government spends on infrastructure, it's one thing. But when you have real estate, there is a lot of private sector, there is access to credit that they need, which is not very forthcoming, given the state that they are in. Sorry, please go ahead.
See, real estate is a very good example. The fact is, if you take the China comparison, we've seen that 28% was the 8% comparison that you just gave, Gautam. The fact is, the Chinese economy, they moved from one level to another. While they became the back end of the world, manufacturing back end of the world, they fundamentally grew because of the strength of its own internal economy as well, of the demand and supply as well. So what we have to do when we're talking about labor, for example, labor codes may be too much to fix in an interim budget, but fundamentally, if you're looking at the Teslas of the world coming to India, you're looking at, we are now 8%, 9%, 10% of the smartphone manufacturing globally, right? Of Apple's of Apple, for example. On electronics, is now among the top 5 exports. Now, if you want to really scale up that manufacturing, to take the steps that along the line that China took 15-20 years ago, and to be competitive, you have to change labor laws. And I think there is significant amount of thinking in the government to go towards that route, especially for women working and so on. How you do it is the question. Can you do it in an interim budget? There's also a concurrent list issue. So those are kind of
the only way you can do that effectively without disruption, social disruption, is by growing other parts of the economy. Land, for example, is a very touchy subject because so many people are connected to land.
All right, Rahul, just give me 1 second. I think we're getting shots of the Prime Minister inside Parliament. Yeah, we can go full frame with that. He's just arrived there. He will, of course, chair the cabinet meeting. The cabinet will then give its stamp of approval to the budget, after which the finance minister and her team will head out to Rashtrapati Bhavan to give a copy of the budget to the president. But you can just see the Prime Minister arriving there in the new Parliament building. Like Gaurav and others have been pointing out, or reporters have been pointing out, it will be the first budget speech in the new Parliament building. So whether or not there will be something to underline that fact, some announcement by which this budget can be identified and marked with, because it's the first budget in the new Parliament building, we don't know. But rest assured, I think the Modi government has this eye for history and its place in history.
We just heard Nilesh Shah some time back, and I think he gave us a bit of a hint. He said that, look, fiscal consolidation is what has distinguished us from certain other economies. We also have a glide path. I don't see the Modi government going for a very big bang populist. I mean, I don't like to use the word populist because it has negative connotations. There's nothing wrong with being populist in politics, because you are actually serving the interests of the public, the people, the populace. So let's not add a pejorative to it, but I just feel that profligacy may not come through in this particular budget. It never has with the Modi government. I think that's one of the reasons why we are, we have rather confidence in the government that it will move very firmly in the direction of fiscal consolidation. I think that will remain its leitmotif. I think that's one fundamental thing.
We've got our colleague Payal, who's joining us from the new Parliament building. So our colleagues were pointing this out. It will be the first budget speech of the Finance Minister in the new Parliament building. We're getting pictures, Payal, of the Prime Minister arriving for that cabinet meeting where the approval will be given to the budget, and then, of course, the Finance Minister will present that at 11 o'clock. Just walk us through what is happening there right now.
Well, in fact, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Zaka, has just walked into the cabinet meeting about 5 minutes ago, but the Prime Minister and the other ministers have been there for the last 40 minutes. The cabinet has been underway. We are given to understand that there could be about 7 to 8 other agendas apart from this approval of the budget. And Nirmala Sitharaman walked in to the cabinet meeting smiling, when we asked her, when we asked her what we can expect from her in this budget, all she gave us was a smile as well. So obviously, there is something which one has to look forward to as to how this budget is going to really turn out to be. The cabinet meeting is currently still on as we speak, and in a bit from now, the cabinet ministers will leave from the cabinet meeting. And in fact, Zaka, just as we speak, the cabinet meeting has just ended, and beg your pardon, the cabinet meeting has just about ended, and we'll have to just get some updates because we can see a lot of leaders leaving from the cabinet. So that means that the budget has been approved. We'll have to just get an official confirmation in a couple of seconds. But yes, we do see, other people being invited into the cabinet. In fact, Ministers for Law and Justice, Arjuna Meghwal and Pankaj Chaudhary and Bhagwat Karat are all walking into the meeting just as we speak because, obviously there could be some other agenda to pursue. But yes, for now, the cabinet has met to approve the budget in particular.
All right, Payal, we'll leave it at that. If we go back to the previous graphic, and I love the way our team says the Aam Aadmi's expectations, so it doesn't apply to any of you guys. But, we were talking about real estate and how to spur real estate, and we've been talking about this for the last 10 years.
Actually, we're quite modest. We have no...
You're not an Aam Aadmi, please. Don't try to convince yourself or any of us.
I feel like it, I'm sorry, I feel like it when we look at when we look at our
bank statements. But listen, about spurring real estate, right? Got to weigh in on this. The tax exemption that you get on the interest component has been 2 lakhs, I think, for the last 5 years, maybe even more than that.
That's right.
What stops government from incentivizing that? And in the new regime, there isn't even that exemption. So then what's the messaging?
No, it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that question because this government has made it very clear ever since it came out with the new income tax regime that the new income tax regime is going to be the default option.
Yeah.
It wants to do away with a plethora of exemptions that has actually made the system inefficient. The Income Tax Act, if you look at the Income Tax Act 1961, and it's a maze. You cannot go through. That's why all of us need a CA to go through all of this.
Yeah.
The government has made it very clear that if it has signaled its intent that the new tax regime is going to be the default option so far as this government is concerned, and it wants more and more and more people to opt for the new option. The government has come out with an argument, and last year also it repeated that argument, saying that actually people end up saving more on taxes if it opts for the new option. And that is the reason why even Section 80C, for instance, which was first increased from 1 lakh to 150,000 in 2014, has remained unchanged for almost 10 years now. And if people have to save, they don't need incentives, tax incentive to save. They should save in financial asset classes like mutual funds, etc., where money grows and multiplies more strongly. And tax should be paid for the sake of tax, and savings should be made for the sake of savings, not for the sake of tax savings.
Okay, I'll take a break on that point. Savings for the sake of savings and tax for the sake of tax, and not the other way around. We'll take a quick break. It'll be our final break before, in what, another 40 minutes or so, the Finance Minister rises to present the interim budget for 24-25. She will give an outlook as to how the Modi government intends to take the India economy story forward. But more than that, I guess it will also be an account of what the Modi Sarkar has done in the last 10 years for the India story and for Indians therein. Quick break. We'll see you right on the other side in 2 minutes. This is Budget Before Ballot, the final budget speech before the general elections.
Co-presented by a big change in terms of both the factors, ease of doing business and cost of doing business. The logistics cost coming down supports manufacturing. So there is a domestic market. India is becoming more competitive, and when I mean more competitive, not just from business itself, but also from the digital public infrastructure which is being created. That for me is a very big differentiator from the rest of the world. That is the reason why I believe it's a very unique positioning today, or a unique opportunity today. On the geopolitical side, you have the rest of the world looking at India as a strategic trusted partner. You have Indian economy growing at a very good rate. And compared to the rest of the world, let us say, even the forecast for this year is 3.1% rest of the world. And here we are by IMF, and here we are speaking about, at least CIA's view is it will be in excess of 7% in 25.
Right.
So if I keep all of these factors in mind, I think good domestic market, a geopolitically trusted partner, a focus on cost and ease of doing business, I think you can't get any better than this.
You also talked about continuation, and you're absolutely right. Of course, the government has already showed a lot of confidence that they're going to present a full budget post the election. So that's of course on the political side. But I do want to ask you, if this government was to show its intent on those markers, plus markers, particularly the infrastructure spending and the control on the deficit, two of its highlight issues, do you expect that in this interim budget there will be that intent shown on both of these markers?
Yes, I believe so. I think this government has completely walked the talk in the past as well. So I think there would be obviously necessary support required for various other actions, which I'm sure there will be a direction about. I think the Finance Minister mentioned about, one of the other focus, or rather let me step back for a minute. One of the reasons why we have had very good growth is that there has been a focus on, I would call it the lesser growing sections of the business and the population. So that equitable growth requirement is something which obviously is important also from the economic side as well. Therefore, we do expect that both of these factors will be maintained. Directions should be given for continuing the equitable growth story. Okay. And last but not the least, make sure that the direction is set for the future.
If I was to talk about any one highlight that you are looking forward to, I'm not sure if I can use the word big bang given that it is an interim budget, but the big highlight that you are looking forward to, what would that be?
I think it's very difficult to say one, but I will put it in a different way of saying continuity with clear directions being given on how the future is going to be. So rather than be specific big bang, I will say it is these two messages which will come across the budget is what we are expecting, and that will be the real, I would call it, joy for everyone.
All right. Mr. Adinesh, thanks a lot for talking to us. And of course, we look forward to interacting with you post-budget as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. On that note, we're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. We're inching closer to the Finance Minister's speech. And of course, our coverage will continue with experts in just a bit.
आप तो जानते ही हैं कि जब चुनाव का समय निकट होता है तब आमतौर
Welcome back to our special coverage here on CNN News 18, Budget Before Ballot. These are the latest pictures of the Finance Minister at Rashtrapati Bhavan, along with the President presenting a copy to the President also giving her, I presume, some kind of sweet before she stands up to present the budget. The entire team, the Finance Secretary, the Revenue Secretary, the Economic Affairs Secretary, and of course the two Ministers of State for Finance are also present there in this meeting. It's a brief affair, as it were, and then the Finance Minister returns to the Parliament, where the Cabinet gives its approval to the budget, and then at 11 o'clock, in about 35 minutes from now, she rises to present the budget. Our experts in the studio are here. You know, the contrast between that picture and you guys is that there are two women at the forefront of that picture, and in this studio it's all men in black suits. Rahul Shivshankar leading the pack.
Rahul Shivshankar unfortunately is part of the downtrodden.
Downtrodden blue suit. But yes, we did of course have a couple of women in our, and one dressed in blue.
You know, the female labor rate, participation rate needs to increase in the studio. That's where we need to start.
I like the way you're looking at Rahul.
I know, I like the way,
because in the previous segment, he said bank statement and he pointed at me. So I'm just returning the favor.
That is hardly a favor. No, but fundamentally, I think, look, I have a feeling that there is going to be something. If we are talking about addressing political constituencies, there's definitely going to be something for women in this particular budget. The Prime Minister actually hinted at that yesterday when he came up in front of Parliament, said Ram Ram to everybody, and then talked about how they're going to be focused at uplift of the women sector. And remember, and I think he will be able to give you, Nalin will be able to give you the numbers about how much the women vote actually matters to the Bharatiya Janata Party.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The creation of a new women vote for the BJP has been at the center of the BJP's rise, along with the other things that along the cultural nationalism issues and so on under Narendra Modi. Fundamentally, women in India at the national level, in national party level, always voted much more for Congress than for the BJP historically.
And NARA data that you have plumbed basically and pioneered gives those numbers out in your book.
Thank you. They always voted more for the Congress, number one. Number two, women always voted much more than much less than men. 2019 was the first election in Indian history where the women turnout was slightly higher than the male turnout. And in state after state after state, in all the battleground states, in those states, women voters outvoted men for the BJP by a margin. So that is at the heart of Mr. Modi's political model. So if you look at the Republic Day parade, the entire this has been this time was noticed a lot. But if you go back the last 5 years Republic Days, increasingly women participation visibly. It's a political statement. Women have always been in the armed forces or police for a long time, but to project them in this manner is very much part of a political language. And that's not just political imagery, if you like. You look at the amount. PM Awas is a simple example. 17 million houses built, 64% of them in the names of women. You look at Swachh Bharat, toilets. Over millions of toilets built, and they are personal toilets which have a direct impact on gender at the village level. So that's very much been part of the Modi template, and I think we will see more of that.
And it's not just because of cultivating, constituencies per se. It also feeds into this emphasis on moving towards a casteless polity. And women, if you can target them, of course, you can overarchingly cover that with just 50% of the population by focusing on the primary identity, which is
I'll give you an
their,
example of this.
their
Rahul,
gender.
that's a great point you brought up. In the UP election last year, there was a lot of talk about the Jat vote, right?
Exactly.
Now, this idea of cross-cutting categories which cut across caste. At one level, the BJP, which used to be an upper caste rich party, has become much more broad-based. Like you said, in the Narad Index we showed that it's got a much larger base among the non-Yadav OBCs and non-Yadav Dalits. But look at the Jat vote, for example, in UP last year. If you demographically and gender-wise, is the older Jats in the male category voted much against the BJP. The younger Jats and women fundamentally voted in favor of BJP, which is why they swept Western UP. So, and that shows you how the old templates have changed.
But let's bring it back to the budget
that the Prime Minister talked about also focus on primary identities, not so much on caste identities.
Let's bring it back to the four. I mean, you can call it the voter bloc, or you want to call it whatever you want. But women, youth, farmers. And what was the fourth?
Garib.
And Garib. You see specific announcements in the Finance Minister's budget for these four blocks of the populace?
Absolutely, yes. And either it will be new schemes. Likelihood of a new scheme being announced is lower because it's a vote on account or an interim budget.
Yeah.
But definitely more allocation and more emphasis on all these four segments. And just to digress a bit, you asked Gautam to describe Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and her tenure, and he used the word courageous. I would just like to add that because she has been courageous also on one big front, which is trying to bring in transparency in India's public finance management, particularly in fiscal, in the definition of fiscal deficit. Because what she has done is she has brought into the into the definition of fiscal deficit, which were earlier components which were earlier considered to be off budget liabilities, but anyway was showing up as government borrowing, and these are essentially in food, fertilizer and fuel. And that is a massive change from, say, a previous era where the fiscal deficit numbers would come around, say, 3% or 4%, but if you look at the whole picture, it would be close to double digits, which is what Nirmala Sitharaman's tenureship as finance minister is actually.
But what is the government doing to move away from those subsidies on food, fuel and fertilizer? Like Rahul was saying, I think there's some data point that came on one of the pieces
I'll tell you.
A few days ago, that the FFF subsidies are pretty much at the same levels that they were 10 years ago.
No. So, well, I mean, looking at the levels is one way of looking at it. But if you look at fuel, for instance, one of the most complex pieces of energy economics has been to dismantle fuel subsidies in the manner that this government has gone about doing it. So diesel and petrol prices now are market determined. That was almost unthinkable, say about 12, 13 years ago, when every time crude prices used to go up, there used to be big meetings in the finance ministry, in the petroleum ministry, and the oil marketing companies would come and say that you give us subsidies, so they will cushion the subsidies and the oil prices.
But what explains then the reversal of the trend from Modi 1 to Modi 2? In Modi 1, the subsidies declined from 2.5% to 1.4% of GDP. This is all three, FFF, all the three as a block. But in Modi 2, the trend is reversed.
In Modi 2, the food subsidies have gone up significantly also because of the COVID payouts. And that stands out between 3 years, 2021, 21-22 and 2020, and that has continued for now.
They're now continuing it for another 5 years.
So that is going to continue. And if you have a case saying then we need to stop food subsidies during COVID period, I don't think I agree with that, because that is a merit subsidy. So we need to distinguish between what is merit and non-merit. And if the whole argument about freebies is about non-merit subsidies, reveries is about non-merit subsidies. It's not about merit subsidies. I think large part of the food subsidies qualify as merit subsidies.
No, and quite frankly, I don't think these subsidies will ever disappear. Very honestly, I mean, look at it from
till there is deprivation at the levels that there are in India.
Exactly.
It won't disappear.
Not just because of the fact that it's a political thing, but even otherwise, as I think you said correctly,
I slightly disagree with you on this, because look, fundamentally, if I understand that there was a merit subsidy need at that particular point to provide food, but continuation of it for another 5 years, you are actually then telling people that, look, maybe the recovery hasn't been V-shaped for all sections.
Just give me one moment, because we're going from food subsidy this end of the pyramid to the other end of the pyramid. I'm going to go across to my colleague Shivani, who is at CII, and she has 2 leading India Inc. CEOs with her. So go ahead, Shivani.
Thanks a lot for that, Zaka. Barely any time before the finance minister's speech, so I'm going to keep it brief, and I'm going to talk to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General, CII, and also Mr. Kamal Bali joining us, President and MD Volvo Group India, also CII Southern Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Limited time, so I'm going to touch upon the concern points. Mr. Banerjee, coming to you first, there's been a concern about private participation and private investment. When is that cycle going to kick in, and what can the government do to boost that sentiment?
So, good question. Private sector, my first answer to your first part of the question is private sector has started kicking in. I'm seeing new investment, fresh investments coming into many sectors. And many sectors, cement, capital goods, pharmaceuticals, one can go on. There are quite a few where we are seeing already fresh investments taking place. Number two, if you see in the private sector, the capacity utilization for almost 75% of our companies our sectors are between 75 to 100%, which is a strong indicator that new investments are coming in. And the third and the last point is what the government has done very well during COVID and post is the capex spending, which is strong. So we would like to see the capex of the government continuing at 20%, which will crowd in the private sector investment.
Mr. Bali, coming to you, how would you describe the sentiment as far as the industry is concerned? Ease of doing business, which has been a big talking point in India over the last 10 years. What do you expect mostly from the finance minister today?
So I think, first of all, the sentiment is very positive, and you all know that India is in spotlight for many reasons now, many good reasons. I mean, when we travel overseas, we find so much of traction to the India story. People really now, you don't have to sell the India story anymore. I mean, it is already there, and therefore, so that's one good news. And second, I will completely agree with CB that the focus of the budget needs to continue as in the past years on investing in the capex for infrastructure development, because that has a multiplier effect, not only for a long-term growth of the economy, also for the current. You create jobs, you feed into the core sectors of the economy like cement, steel, and it is also a reflection to your first question, basically that leads to a huge upside on demand, which then leads to a virtuous cycle of more investments coming in, private sector kicking in. So I would personally feel that we should continue on this particular journey.
Is there a concern on the MSME front that has been voiced for quite some time, also on job creation?
No, I think MSME is a very important part of the manufacturing, so there is no doubt about it. And our MSME sector has been fragile over many years, though they are improving in a good way, because the world is shifting at a very fast pace in terms of new technologies, in terms of disruptions in the whole business model. So we have, and at CII we are doing a lot of work in this direction, and I think this is a very important point you raised, and I think there should be some very specific initiative which the CII can run for the government in the interest of MSMEs, and that's one area that should be a focus area too.
So your thoughts on MSME plus job creation? There's been a lot of criticism about this being jobless growth.
So, MSME is a sector which will employ, which is an employment generating sector. Now, while the large companies, we have good results, we are seeing opportunities, but today, as was mentioned by Kamal, there is a need for MSMEs to graduate or rather digitally transform themselves. There are new technologies, new issues. So access to financing so that these the MSMEs could really focus on digital transformation, technology adoptions, etc. is required, and therefore support to the MSME sector is important. A lot was done earlier also for the MSME sector, but with the changing nature, when they need to be also linked to the large industry on the supply chain and the global world. So there is a need for buttressing that. And coming to the issue of jobs, as you said, MSMEs can create a large number of jobs, but jobs, MSMEs are also linked to a lot to the rural, non-farm sector, the non-agricultural rural sector, so to say. So if we are able to encourage them into those areas, I think we will see a lot of jobs coming both in the rural India, which is important, and also in the MSME sector.
Speaking of rural India, demand has been muted. Do you think something particularly needs to be done about that?
So I would think that the budget the interim budget would focus and would need to focus a lot on the rural sector, farmers, very, very critical and important focus on irrigation technologies. Today what's happening is a lot of, tools could be used, especially technology again, AI, etc., weather forecast, seeds, research on agriculture. All of that is going to be very, very critical. And I think the rural sector, the rural demand and the rural sector, and through the direct tax intervention of income tax, there could be a lot.
You mentioned direct tax. I wasn't going to ask you about that, but what is your expectation? Because our viewers would be very keen to know minutes before the finance minister's speech.
So what, for at every budget there is an expectation, and the expectation is that the budget is for all. And I think this time the budget should be also for all. And therefore, yes, of course, to spur demand, to spur, to really navigate through lots of challenges, money in the hands of people across all sections, especially the poorer sections, would be very, very critical and important.
This being an election year, this being a vote on count before an election, do you expect something populist to come in this budget, Mr. Bali?
I think the actions which the government has been taking, they will move, to my mind, in that direction, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is inclusive growth, they will continue to do that. I don't expect any major populist measure.
But income tax break could be greatly populist and something that has been awaited for a very long time.
I would think that the budget should be popular.
Yes.
It should be a popular budget. Popular budget need not necessarily be a populist budget.
That's well said, CV. Absolutely, I agree.
But sir, from your point of view, for example, from the Volvo Group's point of view, what have been some of the pressing points and something that you think could be addressed, should be addressed?
I think the key for all of us in the industry is how do we grow our manufacturing to occupy a much more stake in the GDP. So typically manufacturing has been is varying between 15 to 17%. We want this number to go up to 22 to 25%, because if you look at all large economies in the past, if you look at Germany, if you look at Korea, China, it's manufacturing which has anchored these economies for many, many decades. So India is going to be no different. In some ways, we jumped from agriculture to services and we skipped that middle layer of manufacturing in the past. But I'm sure, I think a huge focus has been seen, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, with the PLI schemes, with many more investments coming into the country, with all sunrise sectors coming into India. So I see a new birth for manufacturing in India. I personally believe you will see a story which is going to be a very, very strong story, as strong as services in the manufacturing sector in the next 5 to 10 years.
Now, this is something that has been talked about for quite some time. We cannot quite be the growth engine that we hope to be for ourselves and for the world without manufacturing playing a key role.
So, the manufacturing sector expansion from 15-16% to 25% would be a critical factor both for India to be in the global value chain, global supply chain. It's going to be very, very critical. And manufacturing, going back to your earlier point, manufacturing, say today we need a lot of tweaking today to see how we take into fold the success and the importance of the small and the mid-sized companies in manufacturing. They would have to play a very vital role. It's just not the large companies. Then how do we get global companies to operate here and get ourselves linked so that we develop a supply chain and then create abilities for us to be to actually be able to manufacture what global companies in India would be able to would be doing. So today India is an attractive destination, as was mentioned by Kamal. So we will continue to get a lot of investment, but we also need that base for them to have local supply chain established. And I think therefore we need across the chain ancillaries and small scales to develop.
Final couple of questions before I toss back to our studio. Very quickly, overall, this is of course a budget which is just pre-election. 10 years of Narendra Modi Sarkar. Your highlights of what they've done well, and what is something you look forward to?
I think they've done very well on infrastructure. Not only have they spent a lot of money, anecdotally, when you travel around the country, you can see a lot of new infrastructure, either already ready or in the process. So I think full marks there to the government on infrastructure creation. So that's one the other one is very clearly the digital transformation which the country has seen, and today we have actually become the epicenter of digital transformation. If you look at the fintech transactions, the largest number of fintech transactions in the world take place in India today. So I think that's basically, so therefore that has also led to financial inclusion of the bottom of the pyramid. So I think that's the second big win, I would say, for this government in the last 10 years. And third, of course, is basically on the sustainability aspects, on committing to going on decarbonization, a lot of focus on renewable energy sources. So I think on sustainability, on digital transformation, and on infrastructure creation, to my mind, these are the three takeaways of this government.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee and Mr. Bali, and look forward to your views post-budget as well. With that, I'm tossing over to you back, Zaka, in the studio.
All right. So, view from CII. One thing we haven't talked about is we have, another 15 minutes before the finance minister rises to present the budget. It's an interim budget, a vote on account, and of course, the main one will happen post-elections in July. But Gaurav is here, and one barometer is how the Sensex reacts to the finance minister's speech. I believe she has the record for the highest intraday turnaround in the Sensex. I think it was a
21-22 budget. February 1st, 2021, 4.25% rise in the Sensex. But if you compare this to the last interim budget, 2019-20, Piyush Goyal's budget, Sensex closed 0.43% up. So it was broadly flat. 2021, that was the COVID budget, when the fiscal deficit was fixed at 9% of GDP. Markets clearly did not like it. Markets fell minus 2.5%, contracted 2.5%. 1920 final, her first budget in July, markets fell 1.19%. But broadly, it's been rather flat. Last year, we know it was an outlier year because despite being a great budget, a good budget, and during the course of the budget speech, the markets went up by more than 1,000 points, but eventually fell because of Hindenburg and Adani.
But tell me this whole business about short-term and long-term capital gains, that's a big market mover. Do you see any announcement in that regard?
I do not expect. The markets, I think, are not expecting a big change in the capital gains tax structure, although it's very convoluted at this point in time. The tax structure itself, for different asset classes, there are different rates and different tenures and different slabs, and also different rules for imposing capital gains. There is a clear case for consolidating this and standardizing this into one single, easy to administer, simple regime, but that hasn't come about, although we have been talking about it for the last 3-4 budgets at least. I would expect, I think, if anything of that nature has to come, because it will be significantly market moving and will also require a fair degree of consultation, will probably come in the final budget whenever it's presented.
Success has been on GST, and I think we're looking at 18 lakh crores for 2023.
Almost 20.
Yeah, almost 20 lakh crores. Again, when it came in, there was a lot of confusion. States were not entirely fully on board. I think the first year was pretty difficult, and then it's sort of kept up. And today, you can't think of an indirect tax regime without GST. What will it take to do the same for direct taxes? Because we've been talking about direct tax code for a number of years.
I think with direct taxes, this has been one of the biggest points that they've been talking about but not implemented.
Exactly.
Direct tax reforms has been on the agenda for a very long time, and there's been a lot of discussion around it and all of that, but I don't think there's been any movement. They've made the instance of collection, etc., made it more online rather than like the digital innovations around it. But at the end of the day, from a tax structure point of view, it's problematic. Take many instances of capital gains. What you're saying. So take capital gains. With capital gains as well, not only is it a problem across asset classes, if you start looking at crypto, the capital gains there is a completely different ball game, because you can't offset, you can't do anything.
That's your marginal rate. That's what she said. In order to keep people away, you will be taxed at your marginal rate of tax.
No. Capital gains.
Yeah,
I'm not talking
crypto gains.
capital gain. In capital gains, you can't offset. See, in most other capital gains, you're allowed to offset your capital gains with other losses. With crypto, no matter whether you make a profit or loss, you can't offset. There is an issue there fundamentally in terms of reconciliation. You can have your reasoning for doing what that is. It's not a question of whether you're right or wrong, but I'm just saying it's convoluted. And you need to have a simpler regime in terms of taxes per se, especially with direct taxes.
But wasn't that the idea behind the new tax regime? You have 3 flat rates or 5 flat rates, and then, like you said, you save for savings sake and not for tax savings purposes. But that hasn't come about.
I don't think that will ever happen also, quite frankly. Savings for savings purpose is great. It's like saying you get insurance not because you need to be insured and not for savings.
That's right.
It's this. I mean, it's a entire behavioral shift that needs to happen.
No, I think it's also got to do with incentives. So, I mean, I don't agree with the fact that you need to do insurance for the sake of insurance. You don't need to buy ULIP products that is you don't need to save to buy an insurance. But savings is savings, insurance is insurance. These are two different things.
So, what is stopping us from going 10, 20, 30%? These are the
so what is stopping
politics? Politics, signaling and symbolism.
I
That's what it comes down to.
I think it's much more than that. I think there are a lot of tax incentives that are available in the previous tax regime that is forcing people to stay on with the previous tax regime. So if you have an ATC, Section ATC deduction of 150,000, if you have an interest rate, housing interest rate, and a plethora of other stuff, other deduction available in the previous income tax regime, you'd rather stay there then move on to
what is stopping? Let's say, and this is a government with a big majority, right?
I'll tell you this.
What is stopping a government from saying in ATC we will only have Provident Fund, right? Whatever other savings you want to do, it's in NPS. Go ahead and invest in NPS. If you want, let's say, saving money for a rainy day. Everything else we're abolishing in ATC.
I'll tell you the mind of Nirmala Sitharamanji. In my book, when she was launching my book Reform Nation, I had critiqued her on exactly this point. That Chidambaram had left us with 3 elegant tax rates, and now we are at 11 effective tax rates, and this needs to be simplified. So she said, you go and ask the people and the accountants. People are actually happier with so many slabs than they were. So this is the mind of this is what is the public answer to these questions. But I completely and absolutely agree with you. We need very simple, not only in direct taxes, which is 10, 20, 30, but even in GST, we need to compress all this. Now, could it be a state of political economy? Could it be trying to look at various taxation through various constituents? I don't know. Another point on taxation. Every budget, it increases the
But I think you've just given your answer.
It increases the tax level. Today at 7 lakh, you don't pay any taxes. Now, my question is, I think, aren't we prosperous enough today? Forget the extremely poor. Aren't we prosperous enough today that every person can give 1,000 rupee tax? It's a tax discipline. Why do you want to? I agree with the rich should pay more, etc., etc. But that the non-rich should not pay any taxes whatsoever is also not correct. I think this need to reshape the thinking around how we pay taxes. And on direct tax, she has simplified it.
As I'm saying, that all comes down to politics
That's a state subject.
and signaling.
Farmers' taxation is a state subject. It's not a union subject.
No, but if you're deriving
but if
income
it comes
out of
under your
agriculture,
income tax,
surely the government can ask for that
There
income
are
tax
so
from
many
farmers.
subsidies also that are, sorry, go ahead.
So constitutionally even not allowed to impose any kind of income tax on farm income.
So states can, if they wish to.
No, income tax is a central subject. So you cannot impose agricultural income. It cannot.
No, again, Rahul is right. It's because it's politics, but it doesn't fully explain to me why a government with such a mandate cannot say in ATC, other than Provident Fund, everything else is going to be taxable. It's going to be part of your income.
But why would you force me to put it only in Provident Fund?
Fair enough. I mean, Provident Fund I can understand to some extent it's politically touchy, nobody wants to touch it. But beyond that.
This is what are called small savings schemes. And these the schemes that attract a lot of tax incentives are small savings. Large part of, not large, but some part of the government's fiscal deficit, that is the borrowing bit, is also funded from this money. And there are legacy issues here. So you cannot just do away with it saying that no, from tomorrow onwards or next year onwards, we are not going to, we don't need this money. The government also needs this money because the government dips into household savings to fund part of its, fiscal deficit. And that is where the problem is.
Okay, we've got less than 10 minutes, 7 minutes now before the finance minister rises up.
Can I just give you two numbers, two trends? I just calculated them last night. And we were talking about Sensex, right? So markets, India has over the past 5 years, the markets have risen by, they have almost doubled, 95%. Compared to others, if you look at Japan, US, France, Germany, they are 73, 52, 52. So India has outperformed the entire world in terms of markets returns. On currencies, India is down 16%, which is less than South Korea, Brazil, Japan, Russia. So I think financially, when you look at markets and not just stock markets, but also currency markets, India has done a very good job at the top level where a lot of money management, global inflows, outflows happen. Despite the fact that so many FIIs sold Indian equities, nothing happened to the Sensex other than 400-500 points because now the Indian investors are now coming in through systematic investment plans. So I think this tells me that there is a large chunk of people. Somebody mentioned about how Uttar Pradesh had the maximum number of investors.
Than even
I see a large and an increasing chunk of Indian population taking to the financial sector, and that's a very good. The financialization that began at the bottom with payments is also now coming in sophisticated markets like equity markets.
But how does one convert this? So you have at the top end, the markets are doing well. FIIs are investing, there is FDI coming in, I think it's at record 600 billion plus or whatever. But at the same time, at the bottom end of the pyramid, as Rahul keeps saying, why are you then extending free food subsidy for another 5 years? Because clearly there's a problem at the bottom end of the pyramid. How do you match the gap?
See, I think, quite frankly, I think there are two different issues. Because at the end of the day, a subsidy, removing a subsidy, I don't think that will ever go because there is a political motivation to actually holding these subsidies. And apart from these three, there are a whole lot of other subsidies. These are your bulk, but there are a whole lot of other subsidies that exist where they've
I'm coming to it from a political point of view. For years now, we've heard PDS is broken, PDS is broken, PDS is broken. You're using the same PDS for the next 5 years. Reform it.
I agree. I think PDS requires a lot of reform, but that also means that you need, so hopefully these are the things that the government will do over the next 5 years. See, if anything, I think this government has had a vision because somewhere in their head they have kind of figured, right or wrong, they've said that we're going to be here for the next 10 years, next 15 years, whichever way. So they've had a strategy there. But PDS reform, of course, is important. They need to do that. And if you are able to reduce your food subsidy because of that, so be it. But it's still a very, in a country where farm laws actually got what happened, PDS reform is going to be an even bigger issue. It's very touchy.
I think there are two conflicting political economies fighting with each other.
The reluctance to do this is a dead giveaway that there is a problem. Now we can skirt around it. The government can give us alternative figures. There is a problem. It needs to be fixed.
No, I'm not saying what is the problem, Rahul? The government at 303 can't do it. How do you expect a government at 250 to do it?
Because there is
still have state government, too many stakeholders.
There is a huge amount of distress. You have, a private consumption which contributes 61% of GDP, right? 61% of GDP, is not coming through the rural areas.
No, but it doesn't correspond with other markers. For example, as Nalin said, if more people are investing in the stock markets from Uttar Pradesh, these two are contradictory.
But are we suggesting that they are the rural poor? We have 45% of our population which is below, which is subsistence.
You must have seen this. I'm sure you got this data point as well. The government put out that multidimensional poverty has shrunk from 28% to 11%. Again, you can argue with the figures.
We don't know the base, and if the base is...
I think as far as political economy goes, there are two colliding bombs with each other. One is that MSP needs to rise. The other is that food prices need to fall.
Come down,
and these, the balancing of these two colliding and conflicting political economy tools is where every government has been
the other
stranded
thing is
in.
there is a difference between saying do away with PDS and reform PDS. I think that's where it is. No, I don't think you should be doing away with it, but I think there's a better way of actually administering it.
Till you have the levels of poverty you have in this country, you have to have welfareism. And it can be merit-based, it has to be merit-based.
Okay. I've just got an update. I think the Prime Minister has spoken in Parliament. I think he's given a soundbite saying that the interim budget is for the masses. Now, what are you going to make of that, Rahul?
The 4 C's that he has talked about. The Yuva, the women, and the farmers,
and the youth.
And the youth.
And the poor.
And the poor.
So when he says it's for the masses, are we expecting some kind of tax structure change? Are we expecting more subsidies? Kisan Samman Nidhi, Ayushman Bharat? What are we talking about?
Clearly, Kisan Samman Nidhi is up for an appraisal. I would not be surprised it goes up upwards of 8,000 or close to 9,000. 50% rise in 5 years is, I think, inflation index, and that should come up.
Because it's just allocation.
And a Vision 2047 vision statement is going to be laid out comprehensively. With Viksit Bharat, I think, is going to be the key word in this budget speech, along with Gyan, Garib, Yuva, Annadata, and Nari Shakti.
Lalit?
I would add to the point Gaurav is making also the insurance scheme on that and PM Awas. So I think there will be a significant amount of welfareism in the budget and so a lot of optics around that and it will be framed around the 4 C's as Rahul is saying. Something around infrastructure, both government and to increase private sector.
All right, so a budget for the masses is what the Prime Minister has said. How is he? I mean, Mr. Modi is part welfareist, part capitalist, part reformer. I mean, how are you going to capture what he stands for as an economic, agent?
So this has been a long debate about the BJP being a right-wing party, right? But economically on the record of the last 8, 9, 10, a lot of people thought Mr. Modi is going to be like a Thatcher or a Ronald Reagan when he came to power in 2014. But actually, he's favoured the big state. He's focused on creating a welfare state Mark II, if you like, and expanded
the remarkable similarities between.
So in fact, these categories of left and right, which are really Western categories, don't necessarily apply in this case because economically he's very much left of center.
And there's been an upgradation of UPA.
There's
been an upgradation of UPA's thrust.
It's the last 30 seconds, so we can go full frame to the pictures that we're getting from the Lok Sabha. Mega update before the budget. The Prime Minister says it's going to be a budget for the masses, and why not? It is going to be an election year budget. It's a budget that's coming 2 months before the big summer election where the Modi government 2.0 is expecting to be voted back.
That he's now not going to be satisfied with 303. He's going for, as someone said, 400. That's right, 400.
Okay.
400 par is bar.
Let's see if this budget provides that fillip for a 400 par. But politically, the math does seem difficult to get to of 400 par. They have to make significant inroads in the eastern belt and the southern belt. But that's a matter for another day. Today, it's all about the budget, and it's the budget for the masses is what the Prime Minister is saying. Let's see what we get from that budget. Is it going to be increased subsidies for farmers, for Yuva, for women, and of course for the young people? So these are the 4 pillars that have been identified by the Modi government. Let's cut live now.
माननीय सदस्यगण, आपको बुलेटिन भाग 2 के माध्यम से पहले ही सूचित किया गया है कि माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी के बजट भाषण की प्रतियां आपको हार्ड कॉपी के रूप में उपलब्ध कराई जाएगी। अतः बजट प्रस्तुत हो जाने के पश्चात माननीय सदस्य बजट भाषण की प्रति प्रकाशन काउंटर से प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। आपको ये भी सूचित किया जाता है कि माननीय मंत्री द्वारा बजट प्रस्तुत किए जाने के पश्चात उसे मेंबर पोर्टल पर भी उपलब्ध करा दिया जाएगा। माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी,
Honorable Speaker, I present the interim budget for 24-25. The Indian economy has witnessed profound positive transformation in the last 10 years. The people of India are looking ahead to the future with hope and optimism. With the blessings of the people, when our government, under the visionary and dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, assumed office in 2014, the country was facing enormous challenges. With Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas as its mantra, the government overcame those challenges in right earnest. Structural reforms were undertaken. Pro-people programs were formulated and implemented promptly. Conditions were created for more opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship. The economy got a new vigor. The fruits of development started reaching the people at scale. The country got a new sense of purpose and hope. Naturally, the people blessed the government with a bigger mandate. In the second term, our government, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, doubled down on its responsibilities to build a prosperous country with comprehensive development of all people and all regions. Our government strengthened its mantra to Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. Our development philosophy covered all elements of inclusivity, namely social inclusivity through coverage of all strata of the society, and geographical inclusivity through development of all regions of the country. With the whole of nation approach of Sabka Prayas, the country overcame the challenges of once in a century pandemic, took long strides towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, committed to Panch Pran, and laid solid foundations for the Amrit Kal. As a result, our young country has high aspirations, pride in its present, and hope and confidence for a bright future. We expect that our government, based on its stupendous work, will be blessed again by the people with a resounding mandate. Inclusive development and growth. Our humane and inclusive approach to development is a marked and deliberate departure from the earlier approach of provisioning up to village level. Development programs were thus provisioned. In the last 10 years, however, have targeted each and every household and individual through housing for all, Har Ghar Jal, electricity for all, cooking gas for all, bank accounts and financial services for all in record time. The worries about food have been eliminated through free ration for 80 crore people. Minimum support prices for the produce of Annadata are periodically increased appropriately. These and the provision of basic necessities have enhanced real income in the rural areas. Their economic needs could be addressed, thus spurring growth and generating jobs. Social justice. Our government is working with an approach to development that is all-round, all-pervasive, and all-inclusive. Sarvangin, Sarvasparshi, or Sarvasamaveshi. It covers all castes and people at all levels. We are working to make India a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. For achieving that goal, we need to improve people's capability and empower them. Previously, social justice was mostly a political slogan. For our government, social justice is an effective and necessary governance model. The saturation approach of covering all eligible people is the true and comprehensive achievement of social justice. This is secularism in action, reduces corruption, and prevents nepotism, prevents Bhai Bhatijawad. There is transparency and assurance that benefits are delivered to all eligible people. The resources are distributed fairly. All, regardless of their social standing, get access to opportunities. We are addressing systemic inequalities that had plagued our society. We focus on outcomes and not on outlays so that the social economic transformation is achieved. As our Prime Minister firmly believes, we need to focus on 4 major castes. They are Garib, Mahilaye, Yuva, and Annadata. Their needs, their aspirations, and their welfare are our highest priority. The country progresses when they progress. All 4 require and receive government support in their quest to better their lives. Their empowerment and well-being will drive the country forward. Garib Kalyan, Desh Ka Kalyan. We believe in empowering the poor. The earlier approach of tackling poverty through entitlements had resulted in very modest outcomes. When the poor became empowered partners in the development process, government's power to assist them also increases manifold. With the pursuit of Sabka Saath, in these 10 years, the government has assisted 25 crore people to get freedom from multi-dimensional poverty. Our government's efforts are now getting synergized with energy and passion of such empowered people. This is truly elevating them from poverty. Direct benefit transfer of 34 lakh crore rupees from the government using PM Jan Dhan accounts has led to savings of 2.7 lakh crores of rupees for the government. This savings has been realized through avoidance of leakages prevalent earlier. The savings have helped in providing more funds for Garib Kalyan. PM Swanidhi has provided credit assistance to 78 lakh street vendors. From that total of 78 lakh street vendors, 2.3 lakh have received credit for the 3rd time. PM Janman Yojana reaches out to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups who have remained outside the realm of development so far. PM Vishwakarma Yojana provides end-to-end support to artisans and craftspeople engaged in 18 trades. The schemes for empowerment of Divyangs and transgender persons reflect firm resolve of our government to leave no one behind. Welfare of Annadata. Farmers are our Annadata. Every year under PM Kisan Samman Yojana, direct financial assistance is provided to 11.8 crore farmers, including marginal and small farmers. Crop insurance is given to 4 crore farmers under PM Fasal Bima Yojana. These, besides several other programs, are assisting Annadata in producing food for the country and for the world. Electronic National Agricultural Market has integrated 1,361 mandis and is providing services to 1.8 crore farmers with trading volume of 3 lakh crores of rupees. The sector is poised for inclusive, balanced, higher growth and productivity. These are facilitated from farmer-centric policies, income support, coverage of risks through price and insurance support, promotion of technologies and innovations through startups. Empowering the Amrit PD, the Yuva. Our prosperity depends on adequately equipping and empowering the youth. The National Education Policy 2020 is ushering the transformational reforms. PM Schools for Rising India, PM Shri, are delivering quality teaching and nurturing holistic and well-rounded individuals. The Skill India mission has trained 1.4 crore youth, upskilled and reskilled 54 lakh youth, and established 3,000 new ITIs. A large number of institutions of higher learning, namely 7 IITs, 16 triple ITs, 7 IIMs, 15 AIMS, and 390 universities have been set up. PM Mudra Yojana has sanctioned 43 crore loans aggregating to 22.5 lakh crores of rupees for entrepreneurial aspirations of our youth. Besides that, Fund of Funds, Startup India, and Startup Credit Guarantee schemes are assisting our youth. They are also becoming Rozgar Data. The country is proud of our youth scaling new heights in sports. The highest ever medal tally in Asian Games and Asian Para Games in 2023 reflects a high confidence level. Chess prodigy and our #1 ranked player Pragnananda put up a stiff fight against the reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen in 2023. Today, India has over 80 chess grandmasters compared to little over 20 in 2010. Momentum for Nari Shakti. The empowerment of women through entrepreneurship, ease of living, and dignity for them has gained momentum in these 10 years. 30 crore Mudra Yojana loans have been given to women entrepreneurs. Female enrollment in higher education has gone up by 28% in 10 years. In STEM courses, girls and women constitute 43% of enrollment, one of the highest in the world. All these measures are getting reflected in the increasing participation of women in workforce. Making triple talaq illegal, reservation of 1/3 seats for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women as sole or joint owners have enhanced their dignity. Exemplary track record of governance, development, and performance. Besides delivering on high growth in terms of gross domestic product, the government is equally focused on a more comprehensive GDP, that is, governance, development, and performance. Our government has provided transparent, accountable, people-centric, and prompt, trust-based administration with citizen-first and minimum government, maximum governance approach. The impact of all-round development is discernible in all sectors. There is macroeconomic stability, including in the external sector. Investments are robust. The economy is doing well. People are living better and earning better with even greater aspirations for future. Average real income of the people has increased by 50%. Inflation is moderate. People are getting empowered, equipped, and enabled to pursue their aspirations. There is effective and timely delivery of programs and of large projects. Economic management. The multi-pronged economic management over the past 10 years has complemented people-centric, inclusive development. Following are some of the major elements. 1. All forms of infrastructure, physical, digital, or social, are being built in record time. Number 2, all parts of the country are becoming active participants in economic growth. Number 3, digital public infrastructure, a new factor of production as if in the 21st century, is instrumental in formalization of the economy. Number 4, goods and services tax has enabled one nation, one market, one tax. Tax reforms have led to deepening and widening of tax base. Number 5, strengthening of the financial sector has helped in making savings, credit, and investments more efficient. Number 6, GIFT, IFSC, and the Unified Regulatory Authority, IFSCA, are creating a robust gateway for global capital and financial services for the economy. Number 7, proactive inflation management has helped keep inflation within the policy band. Now, the global context, Honorable Speaker, sir. Geopolitically, global affairs are becoming more complex and challenging with wars and conflicts. Globalization is being redefined with reshoring and friendshoring, disruption and fragmentation of supply chains, and competition for critical minerals and technologies. A new world order is emerging after the COVID pandemic. India assumed the G20 presidency during very difficult times for the world. The global economy was going through high inflation, high interest rates, low growth, very high public debt, low trade growth, and climate changes. The pandemic has led to a crisis of food, fertilizer, fuel, and finances for the world, while India successfully navigated its way. The country showed the way forward and built consensus on solutions for those global problems. The recently announced India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor is a strategic and economic game changer for India and others. In the words of Honorable Prime Minister, the corridor, and I quote, will become the basis of world trade for hundreds of years to come, and history will remember that this corridor was initiated on Indian soil, unquote. Vision for Vikasit Bharat. Our vision for Vikasit Bharat is that of prosperous Bharat in harmony with nature, with modern infrastructure, and providing opportunities for all citizens and all regions to reach their potential. With confidence arising from strong and exemplary track record of performance and progress, earning Sabka Vishwas, the next 5 years will be years of unprecedented development and golden moments to realize the dream of developed India by 2047. The trinity of demography, democracy, and diversity backed by Sabka Prayas has the potential to fulfill aspirations of every Indian. As Honorable Prime Minister in his Independence Day address to the nation mentioned, I quote, "There is no dearth of opportunities, as many opportunities as we want. The country is capable of creating more opportunities. Sky is the limit," unquote. Strategy for Amrit Kal. Our government will adopt economic policies that foster and sustain growth, facilitate inclusive and sustainable development, improve productivity, create opportunities for all, help them enhance their capabilities, and contribute to generation of resources to power investments and fulfill aspirations. Guided by the principle, reform, perform, and transform, the government will take up next generation reforms and build consensus with the states and stakeholders for effective implementation. It is an important policy priority for our government to ensure timely and adequate finances, relevant technologies, and appropriate training for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, to grow and also compete globally. Orienting the regulatory environment to facilitate their growth will be an important element of this policy mix. Aligning with the Panchamrit goals, our government will facilitate sustaining high and more resource-efficient economic growth. This will work towards energy security in terms of availability, accessibility, and affordability. For meeting the investment needs, our government will prepare the financial sector in terms of size, capacity, skills, and regulatory framework. Aspirational Districts Program. Our government stands ready to assist the states in faster development of aspirational districts and blocks, including generation of ample economic opportunities. Development of the East. Our government will pay utmost attention to make the eastern region and its people a powerful driver of India's growth. PM Awas Yojana Gramin. Despite the challenges due to COVID, implementation of PM Awas Yojana Gramin continued, and we are close to achieving the target of 3 crore houses. 2 crore more houses will be taken up in the next 5 years to meet the requirement arising from increase in the number of families. Rooftop solarization and Muft Bijli. Through rooftop solarization, 1 crore households will be enabled to obtain up to 300 units free electricity every month. This scheme follows the resolve of Honorable Prime Minister on the historic day of consecration of Sri Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. Following benefits are expected. Savings up to 15 to 18,000 rupees annually for households from free solar electricity and selling the surplus to the distribution companies. Charging of electric vehicles. Entrepreneurship opportunities for a large number of vendors for supply and installation. Employment opportunities for the youth with technical skills in manufacturing, installation, and maintenance. Housing for middle class. Our government will launch a scheme to help deserving sections of the middle class, and I quote from Honorable Prime Minister's words, living in rented houses or slums or chawls and unauthorized colonies, unquote, to buy or build their own houses. Medical colleges. Several youth are ambitious to get qualified as doctors. They aim to serve our people through improved healthcare services. Our government plans to set up more medical colleges by utilizing the existing hospital infrastructure under various departments. A committee for this purpose will be set up to examine the issues and make relevant recommendations. Cervical cancer vaccination. Our government will encourage vaccination for girls in the age group of 9 to 14 years for prevention of cervical cancer. Maternal and child health care. Various schemes for maternal and child care will be brought under one comprehensive program for synergy in implementation. Upgradation of Anganwadi centers under Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan 2.0 will be expedited for improved nutrition delivery, early childhood care and development. The newly designed U-Win platform for managing immunization and intensified efforts of Mission Indradhanush will be rolled out expeditiously throughout the country. Ayushman Bharat. Healthcare cover under Ayushman Bharat scheme will be extended to all ASHA workers, to all Anganwadi workers and helpers. Agriculture and food processing. The efforts of value addition in agriculture sector and boosting farmers' incomes will be stepped up. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana has benefited 38 lakh farmers and generated 10 lakh employment. Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprises Yojana has assisted 2.4 lakh SHGs and 60,000 individuals with credit linkages. Other schemes are complementing the efforts for reducing post-harvest losses and improving productivity and incomes. For ensuring faster growth of the sector, our government will further promote private and public investment in post-harvest activities, including aggregation, modern storage, efficient supply chains, primary and secondary processing and marketing and branding. Nano DAP. After the successful adoption of nano urea, application of nano DAP on various crops will be expanded in all agroclimatic zones. Atmanirbhar Oil Seeds Abhiyan. Building on the initiative announced in 2022, a strategy will be formulated to achieve Atmanirbharta for oil seeds such as mustard, groundnut, sesame, soya bean, and sunflower. This will cover research for high-yielding varieties, widespread adoption of modern farming techniques, market linkages, procurement, value addition, and crop insurance. Dairy development. A comprehensive program for supporting dairy farmers will be formulated. Efforts are already on to control foot and mouth disease. India is the world's largest milk producer but with low productivity of milch animals. The program will be built on the success of existing schemes such as Rashtriya Gokul Mission, National Livestock Mission, and infrastructure development funds for dairy processing and animal husbandry. Matsya Sampada. It was our government which set up a separate department for fisheries, realizing the importance of assisting fishermen. This has resulted in doubling of both inland and aquaculture production. Seafood exports since 2013-14 has also doubled. Implementation of Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana will be stepped up to 1. Enhance aquaculture productivity from existing 3 to 5 tons per hectare. 2. Double exports to 1 lakh crore rupees, and 3. Generate 55 lakh employment opportunities in the near future. 5 integrated aqua parks will also be set up. Lakpati Didi. $83 lakh SHGs. 83 lakh SHGs with 9 crore women are transforming rural socio-economic landscape with empowerment and self-reliance. Honorable Speaker, sir, their success has assisted nearly 1 crore women to become Lakpati Didi already. They are an inspiration to others. Their achievements will be recognized through honoring them. Buoyed by the success, it has been decided to enhance the target for Lakpati Didi from 2 crores to 3 crores. Technological changes, new age technologies and data are changing the lives of people and businesses. They are also enabling new economic opportunities and facilitating provision of high quality services at affordable prices for all, including those at the bottom of the pyramid. Opportunities for India at the global level are expanding. India is showing solutions through innovation and entrepreneurship of its people. Research and innovation for catalyzing growth, employment, and development. Prime Minister Shastri, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri gave the slogan of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Prime Minister Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, made that Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan. Prime Minister Modi has furthered that to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and Jai Anusandhan, as innovation is the foundation of development. For our tech-savvy youth, this will be a golden era. A corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees will be established with 50-year interest-free loan provided. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low and or nil. I repeat that sentence. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology. A new scheme will be launched for strengthening deep tech technologies for defense purposes and expediting Atmanirbharta. Infrastructure development. Building on the massive tripling of the capital expenditure outlay in the past 4 years, resulting in huge multiplier impact on economic growth and employment creation, the outlay for the next year is being increased by 11.1% to 11,111 crore rupees. This would be 3.4% of our GDP. Railways. 3 major economic railway corridor programs will be implemented. These are energy, mineral, and cement corridor. Number 2, port connectivity corridors, And number 3, high traffic density corridors. The projects have been identified under the PM Gati Shakti for enabling multimodal connectivity. They will improve logistics efficiency and reduce cost. The resultant decongestion of the high traffic corridors will also help in improving operations of passenger trains, resulting in safety and higher travel speed for passengers. Together with dedicated freight corridors, these 3 economic corridor programs will accelerate our GDP growth and reduce logistic costs. "40,000 normal rail bogies will be converted to Vande Bharat standards to enhance safety, convenience, and comfort of passengers." Aviation sector. The aviation sector has been galvanized in the past 10 years. Number of airports have doubled to 149. Rollout of air connectivity to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities under Udan scheme has been widespread. 517 new routes are carrying 1.3 crore passengers. Indian carriers have proactively placed orders for over 1,000 new aircrafts. Expansion of existing airports and development of new airports will continue expeditiously. Metro and Namo Bharat. We have a fast expanding middle class and rapid urbanization is taking place. Metro rail and Namo Bharat can be the catalyst for the required urban transformation. Expansion of these systems will be supported in large cities focusing on transit-oriented development. Green energy. Towards meeting our commitment for net zero by 2070, the following measures will be taken. Viability gap funding will be provided for harnessing offshore wind energy, potential for initial capacity of 1 gigawatt. Coal gasification and liquefaction capacity of 100 metric tons will be set up by 2030. This will also help in reducing imports of natural gas, methanol, and ammonia. Phased mandatory blending of compressed biogas in compressed natural gas for transport and piped natural gas for domestic purposes will be mandated. Financial assistance will be provided for procurement of biomass aggregation machinery to support collection. Electric vehicle ecosystem. Our government will expand this and strengthen the e-vehicle ecosystem by supporting manufacturing and charging infrastructure. Greater adoption of e-buses for public transport networks will be encouraged through payment security mechanism. Biomanufacturing and biofoundry. For promoting green growth, a new scheme of biomanufacturing and biofoundry will be launched. This will provide environment-friendly alternatives such as biodegradable polymers, bioplastics, biopharmaceuticals, and bioagri inputs. This scheme will also help in transforming today's consumptive manufacturing paradigm to the one based on regenerative principles. Blue Economy 2.0. For promoting climate resilient activities for Blue Economy 2.0, a scheme for restoration and adaptation measures and coastal aquaculture and mariculture with integrated and multi-sectoral approach will be launched. Comprehensive development of tourist centers. The success of organizing G20 meetings in 60 places presented diversity of India to global audience. Our economic strength has made the country an attractive destination for business and conference tourism. Our middle class also now aspires to travel and explore. Tourism, including spiritual tourism, has tremendous opportunities for local entrepreneurship. States will be encouraged to take up comprehensive development of iconic tourist centers, branding and marketing them at global scale. A framework for rating of the centers based on quality of facilities and services will be established. Long-term interest-free loans will be provided to states for financing such development on matching basis. To address the emerging fervor for domestic tourism, Honorable Speaker, sir, projects for port connectivity, tourism infrastructure, and amenities will be taken up on our islands, including Lakshadweep. This will help in generating employment also. Promoting investments. The FDI inflow during 2014 to 23 was 596 billion US dollars, marking a golden era. That is twice the inflow during 2005 to 14. For encouraging sustained foreign investment, we are negotiating bilateral investment treaties with our foreign partners in the spirit of First Develop India. FDI is First Develop India. Reforms in the states for Vikasit Bharat. Many growth and development enabling reforms are needed in the states for realizing the vision of Vikasit Bharat. A provision of 75,000 crore rupees as 50-year interest-free loan is proposed this year to support those milestone-linked reforms by the state governments. Societal changes. The government will form a high-powered committee for an extensive consideration of the challenges arising from fast population growth and demographic changes. The committee will be mandated to make recommendations for addressing these challenges comprehensively in relation to the goal of Vikasit Bharat. Amrit Kal as Kartavya Kal. Our government stands committed to strengthening and expanding the economy with high growth and to create conditions for people to realize their aspirations. Honorable Prime Minister in his Independence Day address to the nation in the 75th year of our Republic said, and I quote, "We commit ourselves to national development with new inspirations, new consciousness, new resolutions as the country opens up immense possibilities and opportunities. It is our Kartavya Kal." Unquote. Every challenge of the pre-2014 era was overcome through our economic management and our governance. These have placed the country on a resolute path of sustained high growth. This has been possible through right policies, true intentions, and appropriate decisions. In the full budget in July, Honorable Speaker, our government will present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat. Revised estimates. Revised estimates of 2023-24. The revised estimate of the total receipts other than borrowings is 27.56 lakh crores of rupees, of which the tax receipts are 23.24 lakh crore rupees. The revised estimate of total expenditure is 44.90 lakh crore rupees. The revenue receipts at 30.03 lakh crore rupees are expected to be higher than the budget estimate, reflecting strong growth momentum and formalization in the economy. The revised estimate of the fiscal deficit is 5.8% of GDP, improving on the budget estimate, notwithstanding moderation in the nominal growth estimates. Budget estimates for 2024-25. Coming to the year 2024-25, the total receipts other than borrowings and total expenditure are estimated at 30.80 and 47.66 lakh crore rupees respectively. The tax receipts are estimated at 26.02 lakh crore rupees. The scheme of 50-year interest-free loan for capital expenditure to states will be continued this year with an outlay of 1.3 lakh crore rupees. We continue on the path of fiscal consolidation, as announced in my budget speech of 2021-22, to reduce fiscal deficit below 4.5% by 25-26. The fiscal deficit in 2024-25 is estimated to be 5.1% of GDP, adhering to that path. So the gross and net market borrowings through dated securities during 24-25 are estimated at 14.13 lakh crore rupees and 11.75 lakh crore respectively. Both will be less than that in 23-24. Now that the private investments are happening at scale, the lower borrowings by the central government will facilitate larger availability of credit for the private sector. Vote on account. I'll be seeking vote on account approval of the Parliament through the appropriation bill for a part of the financial year 2024-25. I will now move to Part B. Honorable Speaker, sir, over the last 10 years, the direct tax collections have more than trebled and the return filers swelled 2.4 times. I would like to assure the taxpayers that their contributions have been used wisely for the development of the country and welfare of its people. I appreciate the taxpayers for their continued support. The government has reduced and rationalized tax rates. Under the new tax scheme, there is now no tax liability for taxpayers with income up to 7 lakh rupees, up from 2.2 lakh rupees in the financial year 2013-14. The threshold for presumptive taxation for retail businesses was increased from 2 crores to 3 crores. Similarly, the threshold for professionals eligible for presumptive taxation was increased from 50 lakh rupees to 75 lakh rupees. Also, corporate tax rate was decreased from 30% to 22% for existing domestic companies and to 15% for certain new manufacturing companies. Honorable Speaker, sir, in the last 5 years, our focus has been to improve taxpayer services. The age-old jurisdiction-based assessment system was transformed with the introduction of faceless assessment and appeal, thereby imparting greater efficiency, transparency, and accountability. Introduction of updated income tax returns, a new Form 26AS, and pre-filling of tax returns have made filing of tax returns simpler and easier. Average processing time of returns has been reduced from 93 days in the year 2013-14 to a mere 10 days this year, thereby making refunds faster. Indirect taxation. By unifying the highly fragmented indirect tax regime in India, the GST has reduced the compliance burden on trade and industry. The industry has acknowledged the benefits of GST. According to a recent survey conducted by a leading consulting firm, 94% of industry leaders view the transition to GST as largely positive. According to 80% of the respondents, it has led to supply chain optimization, as elimination of tax arbitrage and octroi has resulted in disbanding of checkposts at the state and city boundaries. At the same time, tax base of GST more than doubled, and the average monthly gross GST collection has almost doubled to 1.66 lakh crores this year. States too have benefited. States' SGST revenue, including compensation released to states in the post-GST period of 2017-18 to 2022-23, has achieved a buoyancy of 1.22. In contrast, the tax buoyancy of state revenues from subsumed taxes in the pre-GST 4-year period of 2012-13 to 2015-16 was a mere 0.72. The biggest beneficiaries are consumers, as reduction in logistic cost and taxes have brought down prices of most goods and services. We have taken a number of steps in customs to facilitate international trade. As a result, the import release time declined by 47% to 71 hours at inland container depots, by 28% to 44 hours at air cargo complexes, and by 27% to 85 hours at seaports over the last 4 years since 2019, when the national time release studies were first acted. Tax proposals. As for tax proposals, in keeping with the convention, I do not propose to make any changes relating to taxation and propose to retain the same tax rates for direct and indirect taxes, including import duties. However, certain tax benefits to startups and investments made by sovereign wealth or pension funds, as also tax exemption on certain income of some IFSC units, are expiring on 31/3/2024. To provide continuity in taxation, I propose to extend the date to 31/3/2025. Moreover, in line with our government's vision to improve ease of living and ease of doing business, I wish to make an announcement to improve taxpayers' services. There are a large number of petty, non-verified, non-reconciled, or disputed direct tax demands, many of them dating as far back as 1962, which continue to remain on the books, causing anxiety to honest taxpayers and hindering refunds of subsequent years. Honorable Speaker, sir, I propose to withdraw such outstanding direct tax demands up to 25,000 rupees pertaining to the period up to financial year 2009-10 and up to 10,000 rupees for financial years 2010-11 to 2014-15. This is expected to benefit about 1 crore taxpayers. 1 crore taxpayers would benefit out of this. Economy then and now. In 2014, when our government assumed the reins, the responsibility to mend the economy step by step and to put the governance systems in order was enormous. The need of the hour was to give hope to the people, to attract investments and to build support for the much needed reforms. The government did that successfully following our strong belief of nation first. The crisis of those years has been overcome and the economy has been put firmly on a high sustainable growth path with all-round development. It is now appropriate to look at where we were then. I repeat, it is now appropriate to look at where we were then till 2014 and where we are now, only for the purpose of drawing lessons from the mismanagement of those years. The government will lay a white paper on table of the House. The exemplary track record of governance, development and performance, effective delivery and Jan Kalyan has given the government trust, confidence and blessings of the people to realize whatever it takes. The goal of Vikasit Bharat with good intentions, true dedication and hard work in the coming years and decades. With this, Honorable Speaker, I commend the interim budget to this august House. Jai Hind.
आइटम नंबर 2 श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारमण जी।
So, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table the following statements. Under Section 3(1) of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003, medium-term fiscal policy cum fiscal policy strategy statement and macroeconomic framework statement.
Item number 3, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji.
Sir, with your permission, I rise to move for leave to introduce the Finance Bill 2024.
प्रश्न ये है कि विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में हाँ कहें, जो सदस्य विरोध में ना कहें। मेरे विचार में निर्णय हाँ वालों के पक्ष हुआ, हाँ वालों के पक्ष हुआ। माननीय मंत्री जी विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करें।
So I introduce the bill.
सभा की कार्रवाई शुक्रवार दिनांक 2 फरवरी 2024 को प्राप्त 11 बजे तक के लिए स्थगित की जाती है।
Well, viewers, the top news, of course, coming out of that is that there has been no monumental announcement in tune really with what was to be expected from the finance minister in a simple vote on account. Yes, there have been a lot of promises that have been made to various sections of the society, but fundamentally, if the middle class was expecting tax breaks, if corporate India was expecting tax breaks, that hasn't quite happened. Also, of course, the one headline that's probably going to stir the markets and perhaps already has is that the economy is on fiscal glide path, which is fundamentally important to those who are looking at the health of the economy. At least that's what we are being told. Let me bring you in on this, Gaurav. Let me just bring you in on some of the points that perhaps you will take away from this. But let me tell you before we move to our experts, very, very quickly, viewers, it has been a very workmanlike focus by Nirmala Sitharaman on charting out what is really going to be a disciplined approach to expenditure, keeping within very narrow limits and benchmarks that the government had set for itself. Revenues have exceeded expectations. Large number of important provisos been made to keep continuity as the basis really for moving forward, but fundamentally no big bang announcements coming through. So if there was an expectation that there would be a huge splurge before the elections, that hasn't quite happened. And that was perhaps expected in line really with some of the other budgets that have been put out there by the Modi government. People were expecting, of course, greater increase corrected to inflation in certain heads of direct benefit transfers to farmers, etc. That hasn't quite also happened. The Prime Minister had made it quite clear that this would be a vote on account. It perhaps tells you that the government is quite confident of its electoral prospects going forward. It did not want to risk any of the hard work, the legacy that they have really built up in trying to sort of put together what has been a fundamentally disciplined outlook to expenditure. So that is something that it's quite clear that the government didn't want to sort of squander, and therefore we have seen the government sticking very, very closely to some of its own expectations of itself, especially when it comes to fiscal consolidation. Let me just walk you through some of the points that, of course, have been made by Nirmala Sitharaman in that budget. She's talked about coming back, increasing the ease of living, enhancing India's energy security, mass transport augmentation, middle class, especially the younger middle class, a housing plan for the middle class which is going to be sort of unrolled, a capex outlet hiked by 11%, which is a fundamental headline, women emancipation, especially focusing on women health, a large number of announcements under that, 50-year interest-free loans for the private sector is something that will enthuse a large number of those who are looking to start up companies, etc. Free ration for 80 crore Indians and 517 new routes to enable passenger travel. So that is something that the government has put out there, apart from, of course, focusing on some of its achievements. The first half, the first 25 minutes of the speech focused on how the government has actually come out there and improved ease of living and, of course, the top line numbers of the government. Let's go across and get some reactions from the CI. R. Dinesh is there with us. Mr. Dinesh, how do you see the government, vote on account?
Start? So, the immediate reaction, thank you for joining us today. The immediate reaction would be that the consolidation of the fiscal deficit, and I think our recommendation initially was 5.4%, but it's a 5.1% is obviously a very significant step forward. But at the same time, not sacrificing the focus on growth, so the capex spend has increased by almost 11.1%, which is also very good. So the continued focus on infrastructure growth takes place. The third aspect, which is very important, is the focus on the rural sector and also the four aspects of women, the farmer and the poor being taken care of. The continuation of the housing, both for women as well as for the rural sectors, are all very welcome. So this takes care of the equitable growth approach of the government. And we have to wait and see regarding the direct tax and indirect tax proposals. As the finance minister has said, that will be taken up only in the final budget. So therefore, this budget does not cover that. So as far as we are concerned, it's a very positive step forward with regard to having the headroom available for growth, considering the fiscal deficit and also the focus on equitable growth. From an industry perspective, obviously we will wait for the main budget to come to look at that details. Thank you.
Well, a short statement there from the CII. But as I was telling you, viewers, the focus really is on reassuring India that fiscal consolidation, the glide path to those fiscal numbers, is very much in place, and that has seen already the market reacting extremely positively. So very, very important, because there was always this apprehension that in an election year there would be this lurch towards splurging, to be putting out schemes, etc., that would break the bank, so to speak, and send our glide path towards fiscal consolidation haywire. But that has not happened. It tells you that the government is quite, at this moment, secure in its own political and electoral prospects, which is a very important signal that has come out from the Modi government, because fundamentally it has eschewed any real populism. Infra growth, the capex expenditure has been hiked by 11%, continued focus on infra. There has been visible changes in and around us. When we look at roadways, etc., those that were expecting tax breaks come away disappointed. We continue with the same tax slabs for both direct and indirect taxes, personal and corporate. So no changes there, which was to be perhaps expected. As I had said in the very beginning, viewers, that a government conscious of its legacy, which has been a disciplined one, would not really go there and break the bank, and that has not happened. Rural sector getting a lot of attention in this budget, so did women. And let's try to get some initial assessments. First from you, Mr. Chikkarmani. What do you make of Nirmala Sitharaman's vote on account budget?
It is as predicted. Earlier I had written, and in the morning we had discussed also on this, that she will continue to keep fiscal consolidation in mind. She'll keep it going. There will be no new tax policies or any kind of rebates, etc. coming, and she has done exactly that. This was a vote on account, and a vote on account is what she has delivered. I had also forecasted that she would talk about the past 10 years and give a vision for the next, for the future. She did that, though I feel it wasn't adequate. I had expected her to speak far more on the vision, on the way forward, on the celebrations of the past. She has refrained from doing so, and maybe that's...
Why do you think? Why do you think? Because this was a great opportunity to talk up her 10 years, with 7 years, so as she's concerned as finance minister, and her record, and of course 3 years prior to that.
Yeah. So I don't know why this understated, subdued, it is very unlike this government, which takes the smallest of all points and makes a big deal out of it, or at least talks about it. It's a government that communicates. At every level. In this budget, there was communication on the big issues, but I think she didn't go down the way I had expected, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I would have thought that in the run-up to the elections, this is one major policy space where you get to say what you want to say, at least on the economic policy front. Maybe why she has held back, to answer your question, I don't know.
Maybe it's a signal that the government is quite confident that the people appreciate the work that it is doing, and therefore it doesn't really need to go out there and publicize much beyond. Perhaps that's one of the reasons. Anand Narasimhan also here with us. Let me just very quickly come to you, Soundararajan. What do you make of today's speech?
Look, I think it was exactly what it was supposed to be, which is a vote on account. So if you see, there was a constant reference to what was happening for the 10 years, and a lot of remarks on the side about the previous, the 10 years back up to 2014, the economic mess that there was, and what this government and the 10 years have done. But, and I don't think, quite frankly, that there would have been any big budget announcements now, but there was a lot of, she did allude to preparing a more, in terms of a framework, in terms of a vision, very confidently saying that when we come in July and present the budget, we'll give you a very detailed plan, which means they already know.
Well, the glide path to 5.1%, do you think that's realistic, that number?
I think it's a good aspiration, and I think given what it is, and given they have been generally fiscally prudent, yes, and for the first time though, it's not dependent on disinvestment, which I think is great, because usually your fiscal targets have been largely dependent on disinvestment. So I need to look at the budget details, the documents, to see whether there's a disinvestment target, because it's been a mess, quite frankly.
I don't think there was, I may not have heard, but I didn't think that there was anything explicit.
My point, exactly, that the fiscal targets, whatever they've said, the fiscal deficit targets has not been actually based on that. The other variable that I would be very interested in looking at, even though she said that your income tax collections have gone up and the number of income tax payers have gone up. If you look at the last 2 or 3 budgets, you will see that the revenue deficit's actually been dropping. There's been a problem there. So I would be very curious to see how that aligns now in terms of numbers with the increases that are here, but whether the revenue deficit has actually changed.
Anand?
Well, we got Himal and Gulzar here, so let's say namaste and Jai Hind to everybody here in the studio. The fact is that she's not done anything superlative. Yeah. There's no headline. For us news buffs, it's quite dull, isn't it? But from the industry point of view, she stayed the path. The government is saying we are going to continue to do what we are doing and we are on track. Now my question is, when will private sector start also oiling the wheels?
No, so one thing is, honestly, from the news, yes. From an industry perspective, no news is good news in a way. From an industry, it gives a feeling of stability and continuity. So to that extent, I think it is good. And as a vote on account, we didn't expect anything major. Yeah. But what we did expect, I would personally expect 2 things, out of which one has happened, i.e. things which were expiring, she did mention, are extending. We will look at the fine print, i.e. the manufacturing company incentives and all. Though frankly, my take on that is that you cannot keep on extending it by 1 year each. If you look at last year, you extend 1 year.
Correct.
For a private sector, you don't decide for 1 year. If you are setting up a plant, you will need at least 2 to 3 years horizon.
Correct.
So that would be one, which is extending. The other was the simplification process. So on whether it's on the personal taxation or on the corporate side, for example, there was a want of TDS provisions to be simplified.
Yes.
I thought that would be something that could have been done even on a vote of account. So that's an area where I would have expected some things to come in, which has not. We'll look at the fine print.
Well, from a government perspective, are they very clear on the fact that we've done what we had to do? This is perhaps a report card. And the confidence that the Prime Minister exuded, saying the rest we'll do once we are back in government. Now, you think that sense will continue? The stock markets so far are up, they are not down.
So I think if you see, first of all, let's talk about some figures, right? They talked about increase in tax collections year on year.
Right.
So this time the estimate is around 26 lakh crore will come from tax collections against 23 lakh crore last year. So you see, constant increase in tax collections, that's an indication of, increasing the tax base as well as improvement of compliance, right? So that's one key aspect I wanted to highlight. No change in any tax rate. Today, I'm sure, they did not make any announcement about it, but 2 days ago, government has already made some announcement and issued some concessions on customs duty for mobile phone manufacturing industry.
Correct.
Which were effective from 30th January. So that is something that they had planned to sort of increase the value addition for the manufacturing activities in India. But today's focus was specifically to talk about how GST has increased the tax base, how successful it was. They mentioned the report of Deloitte as well, saying that 94% companies feel that it was a largely a positive move, and the tax base increased twice. So I think these are the key indicators that the government has actually talked about, rather than saying that what they are going to do in today's budget. So as expected, not too many reforms, not too many changes, but still directionally they have given some sort of indication on growing economy, growing tax base and increasing tax revenues.
So growing economy, growing tax base, the GST numbers, the last month Gautam Chikarmane is about 1.72 lakh crores, and she said that we have averaged about 1.64 lakh crore month on month. So that is a significant number compared to when people said nobody is going to pay GST and you are not going to get any revenue at all. But is this an indicator that the private sector is biting the bait? Is it? Are we going to see?
I don't think that,
you have any option. They'll say, "Ab May ke baad dekhte hain."
Yeah, I don't think there is any option. I think if there is a tax system in place, private sector has to bite into it. And I find that instead of managing 17 kinds of taxes, indirect taxes, now if there is only one kind of a bureaucracy that the corporate sector has to engage with, it's definitely a better system. And you can see the numbers are growing. I see them moving towards 2 lakh crore per month very soon.
Let me ask you this. Have they done enough to not do anything in this vote on account budget? The government?
No.
A vote on account, I think these are speculations for the July budget. This a vote on account by its very definition is restrictive in its expression. But I think the next budget in July, in July, that's where a lot of debate, etc., would happen. By the way, did you? Everybody seems to have missed it, or maybe I'm the only one who noticed it. The geopolitics in the budget. Did you hear the stress on Lakshadweep?
Yes.
And I think these are the subtle messaging because the world is now watching India's budgets, and perhaps that was one subtle message.
See, from on an everyday point of view, you would see most of the flights are full. Yes. Most of the connectivity is increased. Budget airlines are charging more than full service airlines, and they're still going full. Trains are going full. Connectivity has increased across the board. So somewhere somebody is making money. You have to accept that somewhere somebody is making money. Is that reflecting in the health of the economy?
It is. In fact, if you see, Gulzar also shared some numbers in terms of the direct tax. And remember, the collection in the fiscal deficit of 1.1, the direct tax collections increases at modest of 10 or 11% as compared to the current, which is around 15%. So in a way, to my side, it shows that it is increasing. Both the GST collections are increasing, your even direct tax collections are increasing, and increasing at a better rate than the inflation. So to my mind, that is a good sign that we are getting into more growth oriented and also more organized one. But to answer your earlier question, I felt, as you said, that there could have been something on the simplification part which could have been kind of also covered in this vote of account.
Could they have done that, Nirupama ji? Could they have announced something around simplification? Or do you think that the government today believes we have done enough in the last 4.5-5 years to not do anything superlative or to try and give any fodder for anybody to say, oh, they are doing this because they are worried about what will happen in Lok Sabha 2024?
I think it is exactly that. See, because quite frankly, I think I don't think they thought the need to do anything now. Clarifications, yes, but if you see, there were some interesting points. Lakshadweep aside, which I also did pick up on, very subtle. As I said, the constant comparison, including the commissioning of a white paper to compare what this 10 years has been to the previous 10 years, which I think is telling as well. But that comparison is important. The constant reiteration saying we inherited a mess and we've now got you out of the mess. That. But also in terms of what they're allocating as long-term interest-free loans for states. Correct. Whether it's for tourism, whether it's for innovation, whether it's for, I think in certain other sectors, I think that's also good because they are saying that we're giving states a lot of leeway. Yeah,
they're saying infrastructure building, anything that is going to do build infrastructure, manufacturing or services which is going to amplify, and there is going to have perhaps a ripple down effect across other states and other. We are ready to give you long-term interest-free loans, they're saying.
Not just, I think in some sense, it's good to be very neutral and say this is what we've done, as in taking a stock of where you are, what you have done so far, because then with a clear indication saying when we come back in July and when we present the budget in July, which is anyway a very positive way of saying we will do more.
Right. Let's ask this question of the industry. Let's go across to Shivani, who's there with members of the CII and FICCI, and ask them. The government is going to continue to spend and they're going to keep one track going. When is the private sector going to get hyperactive?
I have with me Mr. Nikhil Sahni, Chairman, CIA National Committee on Capital Goods and Engineering, and Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Triveni Turbine Limited. I also have with me Anshuman Magazine, Chairman and CEO, India, Southeast Asia and Middle East and Africa of CBRE. Anshuman Magazine, if I begin with you, there's a promise of 2 crore more houses in the next 5 years. That's a direct relation to your industry. That plus what else was the highlight for you?
I think biggest highlight was the increase of capex infrastructure.
11.
That continues. So that is a major one because that will bring in the all the construction activity, etc. Which will happen. On the housing front, she talked about encouraging middle class housing. Although there's no fine, we have to look at the fine print. There's no specifics what would be done for that. Rural, the low cost housing increasing it to 2 crores by 25 is great. So any construction which happens has a multiplier impact on the economy. But the fact is, what was expected, which in a way not for this budget, for next budget, is that in 2022, a lot of the incentives on the housing front were reduced or taken out, and the direct impact of that is that the construction of affordable housing, both construction, the supply side and the demand side, is reduced since last year. So we are hoping in the next budget those incentives will come out, because stats are clearly showing that the supply and demand both have reduced in the affordable housing category. Overall housing is done well, especially luxury and middle class, but mid housing, but more needs to be done. I think the other part, what I liked was she talked about tourism, new airports, skill development. Women were a major part of her speech.
Yes.
So all this will be positive, but as this was a vote on account budget, I think everything, she hit all the right chords, but there was no specifics. What will be, what would the government do? I think that'll come in the next budget.
Mr. Sani, given that actually it was a very controlled, very prudent, very restricted and restrained vote on account by the finance minister, if there were any expectations of anything big bang, it did quite happen, but you would be also happy with the capex expenditure at 11% increase?
Very happy. I think you have to read between the lines. Firstly, everyone knew that this was a vote of accounts coming into today. So firstly, to not have a mention of a lot of policies which could have been seen as populist coming into election is a very big sign of the confidence that the finance minister and the government has going into elections. And also for today, this is a real strength that the government is showing, that they are confident leading into the election in 2024, like in April. But I would say that when we look at the capex growth of 11.1%, given the fact that nominal GDP growth would be somewhere above 13%, of course, as a proportion, capex would come down as a percentage of GDP. But having said that, it has allowed for greater space, as the finance minister said, for the private industry to go out and build fixed capital formation. The research and development initiative, corpus of 1 lakh crore over 50 years at negligible or zero interest rate, is something that's very encouraging. It's something that industry has been asking for a very long time. And it's very interesting that the finance minister has taken a route to not give this through a tax subsidy, which has been given in other countries and which has really failed in India in the past. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this would get implemented. But after all, what we can see with this budget is a continuity of the schemes that the government has in place, and really to build the capital stock of India. As Anshuman had pointed out, this could be in housing or other aspects of infrastructure development, but also in terms of the social capital that the government aims to build. So all in all, very encouraging, very positive, but we look forward to some of the nuances in this budget. And of course, the finance minister did point out that she would come out with a more articulate messaging on what Viksit Bharat and the schemes that they would have in July. So look forward to that.
In the meanwhile, there's been some concern over the private expenditure or investment not kicking in. Is there enough to kind of enthuse the industry as it stands?
Oh yes, most definitely, because I think from my perspective as someone who participates in the capital goods space as well as chairing this committee for CII, we see a great degree of enthusiasm around a number of sectors, especially climate change, and the finance minister was explicit in the country's commitment towards net zero by 2070. There's an enormous need for us to not only build the infrastructure, but also the capital equipment that will be required for that transition. Equally, in areas such as railways, there's a need for us to be able to develop capabilities and capacity. And she did also mention about defense. Now, of course, details are not there, but very frankly, you do have to read between the lines.
Okay, read between the lines. Speaking about one of the things that the government had kind of initiated only just before the budget on 22nd of January, when the Prime Minister was there for the consecration ceremony as well, was 1 crore homes to get rooftop solarized power. And with that, 300 units of free electricity to these solar powered homes. That's a big futuristic vision, obviously tying into the net zero as well that the government has talked about.
Absolutely. Everywhere across the globe, this rooftop solar is a big movement, but solar itself, forget the rooftop solar. And I think this announcement, I was pleasantly surprised that they mentioned about rooftop solar and this will make a huge difference because the electricity tariffs are quite high in our country. And some of the governments, state governments have won on that plank. So it must be really important that if they're giving subsidies on power. And I think one of the other challenges we have is that in many states we are subsidizing power and it's being misused. So anything we can do to do an alternate way, and solar is one of them, I think is very, very positive.
All right. So
again, you have to read between the lines. When you do have rooftop solar, you need to necessarily have smart meters because you have to have duality in terms of connections. So there's a lot that has to be implemented to allow for a scheme to get really utilized by the public. So
no, I really love the way the dimension that you brought in. There are a lot of subsidies that are given on electricity particularly, and concern has been growing what it does to state budgets and deficits particularly. On deficit, of course, Nirmala Sitharaman has talked about how it's 5.8 revised as far as the fiscal deficit for this year is concerned, and for next year estimated will be 5.1 with the long-term vision to bring it below 4.5. That's it from us. For the meantime, a big thanks for our guests for joining us. Back to you in the studio.
Well, thanks for that. So, rooftop solarized, we'll come to that because solar panels themselves are not very affordable, and there's dual meters. Somebody has to make them in such a way that these meters are not so expensive and it makes sense. So, there are a lot of implementation aspects, but Himal, you're also saying that somewhere in terms of manufacturing, you wanted to highlight something?
Yeah, so I think one of the, about this China Plus strategy and helping India make in India in order to promote manufacturing, there was this attractive tax rate of 15% that was introduced in 2019. Now that was due to expire on 31st March 24, i.e. that if you set up a new company and does manufacturing, you get this concessional rate of 15%.
Correct.
We did hear FM speak about incentivizing, make in India, and so I was hoping to see in the fine print that this would also get extended by year. But what the initial readings shows that it's extended only for startups and units in GIFT City. So to my mind, this is an important, area that would
I'm approaching it from a very layman's perspective, and please weigh in on it, Rahul, and you can take it forward. If you want rooftop solarization, then you need to ensure 1 crore homes. That means you need to ensure that the solar panels are affordable. So somebody has to be able to make it in India. In Bharat, it has to be made. The meters have to be dual meters because of the 300 units free plus the units that you extra generate, that you have to hand it back to the transformer. So who's making those meters? Who's doing the implementation here? Interesting aspect that he says is that affordable homes have come down, but the medium and luxury homes have gone up. So how do I read something like this? So there are people who are making more money, they are getting richer, but there are those who need to be perhaps incentivized to be able to buy homes. Yes, somebody who's buying a home, I would like some more leeway as far as the interest on the home loan is concerned, depending upon the tenure and the duration. So some of those things, are we expecting all of this going forward? Yes, Nirupama, Gulzar, everybody. Gulzar.
So I'll talk about the rooftop solar to be very specific. See, last year government has introduced production linked incentive scheme, right, to incentivize manufacturing of these solar panels in India. But currently we don't have so much capacity, and at the same time the customs duty rates were increased, right. So we have currently 42% customs duty if I am importing a solar panel. Now I understand that has been done to discourage import of solar panels, but currently India does not have the capacity. And therefore, if we are actually willing to make these rooftop solar panels affordable, we need to come out with a phased manufacturing program, which actually used to be there few years ago. And until the present demand stabilizes, you should continue to provide some concessions in customs duty. And please keep in mind that any manufacturing industry which is set up, it takes 2 to 3 years time to stabilize and ramp up the demand, ramp up the production, and therefore that has to coincide with the phased manufacturing program on import of solar modules. So that's one point I just wanted to make on rooftop solar.
But the tendency tends to be to import more rather than manufacture at home. So somewhere you have to have you have to create a system or an environment where you force people to make here.
That's why.
See, there is a transition that's happened in the toy industry.
That's a phased manufacturing program I am referring to. Phased manufacturing program actually gives you customs duty concession on import of raw material.
Correct.
Right? So initially it starts with final product, and then it goes to raw material, and then finally it goes to level 2, level 3. So that's the phased manufacturing program I was also talking about. That I'm not saying that give customs duty exemption on solar panel to start with.
Imports, but raw material. Yeah.
But raw material, give lot of concession to raw material so that industry starts manufacturing these items. And until there is a demand supply gap, you need to continue to provide even customs duty concession on some of these products, so that the targets, the ambitious targets that India has to set up, a specific capacity of renewable energy products, those targets are also met.
July budget के लिए note बना लेते हैं.
Absolutely.
Let's they are not going to be able to do anything.
Yes. The demand supply mismatch in that sense, I agree. But I think where the government actually misses the mark multiple times is they themselves are a huge consumer. So why would you not set an example by converting all your ministry buildings, state and center, all your DDA equivalent or your housing complexes that the government builds, why would you not start there?
Correct.
Why would you not make them solar powered? That's your captive demand. The point is, if you're saying why is industry not producing, they may not produce because if it's a huge investment, notwithstanding your cuts in customs, notwithstanding any of the concessions that you're getting, but where is the demand? So you have captive demand that can be generated that easily. I think if you do that, if you make it mandatory, I think the supply will come, because if then the demand is there, people will find a way to supply for that demand.
Right.
And I think the government should be thinking about that.
Right. Let's just quickly go back to Shivani. She's got Vinayak Chatterjee with her. Yes, Shivani.
Thanks a lot for that, Anand. I want to go across to Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, founder and managing trustee, the InfraVision Foundation, joining us. Vinayak Chatterjee, very restrained from the finance minister today. If there was any expectation of something to enthuse the masses or the public at large in an election year, it doesn't look like the government gave in to that. In fact, the government made a very fantastic announcement of a white paper on its economic policies that the government will present. That plus the continuation in this budget suggests a high amount of confidence. How did you read it?
Look, we must first remember that this is just an interim carry-on budget for the allowing the normal work of the Indian nation to carry on for the next 3-4 months. I will restrict my comments to infrastructure. That is what I'm supposed to normally monitor and speak on. And there has been, in the infrastructure circles, there has been a somewhat level of disappointment on the fact that the outlay has increased by only 11.1% vis-a-vis the last 2 years, which increased by 30% and 35% respectively. So if you are talking about an ongoing budget that keeps the same momentum, obviously it has not kept the same momentum of 30-35. And the belief among infra players is that since it's only an interim budget, when the final budget is formulated, whenever in June or July, that we will come back to levels of 30% growth, because that is what the nation requires. For example, if you really look at the economic policy of the government, it has very clearly been articulated as public expenditure, infrastructure investment-led economic growth. So that infra investments then create a booster effect on the GDP. Now at 10 or 11%, if that is carried on, will not give the level of boost and impetus. So we need to go back to a 30-35% level, which I hope will happen when the final budget is ready. Back to you.
Right. In terms of infrastructure push, the government did announce 3 corridors for railways. Of course, not a lot of details that we have right now. They've talked about energy, mineral, cement, port connectivity, high traffic corridors, 40,000 bogies to be upgraded to Vande Bharat standards. Of course, you mentioned capex. You're not totally happy with it. You would have expected to be more. The government mentioned the capex outlay is 3.4% of the GDP currently. There is the net zero commitment. There is the blue economy commitment, etc. Overall, did you see the larger vision, at least in terms of the government, of what it wants to do for Viksit Bharat?
Look, there were some new buttons that were pressed, and I would like to commend the government for pressing those. In short, they relate to a major push on rooftop solar as a measure for poverty alleviation. It pushes PPP formats for agricultural storage. It announces 3 new railway corridors for energy, mineral and cement, which I think is part of the overall push on increasing the logistics efficiency. And it certainly pushes the green button by announcing VGF for offshore wind and coal gasification. So these are the buttons that have been pushed, and they are welcome. And as I said, we look forward to a far more higher outlay when the final budget is announced, because that is what the nation would require as an investment-led strategy to boost GDP. Over to you.
The finance minister said the next 5 years will be years of unprecedented growth. Apart from what you've mentioned, of course, in fact, in terms of infrastructure outlay, what do you think makes the government so confident, given that everybody's been talking about the global headwinds that have been troubling other large economies? What keeps India in good stead, and why do you think the government is confident of the next 5 years being big for India?
Very simple. The fact that India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and that is largely due to our domestic markets powering demand, and the large infrastructure outlays of the past, the high levels of infrastructure investments that have a very strong multiplier effect on the economy. The combination of these two actually gives a sense of confidence to the government, and therefore this confidence is also reflected in the shall we say, in the conservatism exhibited by keeping fiscal deficit within very, very acceptable levels. So these are the reasons that give confidence to the government.
All right. So much to look forward to as far as the full budget is concerned, and of course expectations will be higher. I do want to ask you very quickly as a parting question, there weren't any announcement in terms of, income tax rationalization. There has been some comments about demand not picking up, particularly rural demand. Do you think the government maintained quite a lot of fiscal restraint and also political restraint in what it did today?
I think so. I think to be honest with you, this is not a time for addressing some of the macro issues in the country with the general election staring at us. I think the government has been fair in not making any big bang announcements, and all the issues you mentioned, I think the mandarins in the finance ministry are fully aware of these demands, these pulls and pressures, and I'm confident that, as usual, as demonstrated in the past, when the full budget is announced with a new government in around summer, these will be addressed.
All right, Vinayak Chatterjee from InfraVision, thanks a lot for joining us and giving us your first comments on the budget speech. Back to you in the studio.
Well, thanks for that, and let's quickly now get you a quick report card. We've got Prashant Pitti of East My Trip, Jayant Mehta also joining us in just a bit, and we'll also have Ravi Saxena joining us. But first, a quick check of the report card. If we look at agriculture, direct assistance given to 11 crore farmers. That's what one of the first things that the government has claimed, that this is what we've been able to achieve as far as agriculture is concerned. In terms of employment, they are saying crop insurance has been given to 4 crore farmers. So that's another aspect with under agriculture that will be covered. Let's look at the next point as it comes in on the conveyor belt. It is about employment. Skill India has trained more than 1.1 crore youth. That's a sizable number, ladies and gentlemen, but this has to go into 10. That's what we need to do if we need skilled employment, if given to meet market needs. And that's something which many people are saying. Skill training education is very, very important. Announcement that's been made is upgradation of 40,000 bogies to Vande Bharat. Vande Bharat becoming a very, very popular mode of transportation or commuting, especially the short distances, 4 to 6 hours, and more than 40,000 bogies will get that upgrade. Let's hope we behave as responsible citizens and we don't keep looting and plundering those bogies also or the compartments. Announcement. Port connectivity projects in islands. So Lakshadweep gets mentioned, Andaman Nicobar Islands get mentioned. So clearly there will be a geopolitics aspect and also the connectivity aspect and knowing a little more about our own country. Announcement scheme for housing for middle class, that is going to happen very soon. So that's the carrot that's been dropped. आने वाला है, हमको वापस लाओ, फिर हम ये करेंगे. So that is something which is again a certain level of politics. It's not about what I want for Lok Sabha 2024. It's about what we will give you if you bring us into power. 2 crore homes in 5 years under rural house plan. That's the next point that's been made. 2 crore ghar, and that the project as far as the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is very, very aggressive. The PM and the PMO itself very closely monitoring the progress is there. Ayushman Bharat for Asha and Anganwadi workers. This is a big announcement, and it'll have a huge impact, especially with the Mahila voters. And these Asha and Anganwadi workers are the ones who are pushing rural education, rural health. They are the ones who ensured that the COVID vaccination happened. So big shout out to them. Government to encourage critical cancer, cervical cancer vaccination. This is a big announcement that's coming through, and again oriented towards women and those. As cancer becomes a huge, in fact there is research happening, and by April, May, by the time the Lok Sabha elections happen, we will have something really cutting edge. We'll talk about it later. Interest-free loans for tourist centers. So that's another announcement that's been made. We'll get Prashant Priti's reaction, whether it's going to ease everybody's trip or not in just a bit. But also building more connectivity, more airports. So this is another aspect in terms of services. New plans to strengthen deep tech in defense. This is another announcement that's been made as far as defense sector is concerned. Plenty of announcements across the sectors that have been made. This is the other one where payment security mechanism for EV buses. So this is again which is being pushed actively across municipalities, across cities, where build, operate, transfer kind of a model is being worked, where the ownership of the vehicle continues to remain with the manufacturer itself, and it reduces the capex from a particular state or a particular municipality for that. Funding for offshore wind energy. This is another big tech renewable source of energy, that is wind energy. Are we tapping enough? Are we doing enough? There is going to be funding for offshore wind energy that will be made available, because this is again a capital intensive project or an enterprise, ladies and gentlemen, and this is offshore wind energy. So that will funding will be provided. Another announcement. Prashant Priti is with us. Jayan Mehta, MD Amul, is also with us. Ravi Saxena, retail and consumer durable expert, also with us. Let's go straight across to them. Namaste, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat to everybody. Let me first start with Jayan Mehta ji. Jayan ji, you weren't expecting much, but is the economy, is the government on track? And are you looking forward to the carrots that have been offered post the elections?
Let's look at it in a very positive manner, because Honorable Finance Minister did mention that India is the largest producer of milk in the world. And more importantly, this is the time to prepare for India to become a dairy to the world. And if India today produces almost 24% of the total milk in the world, in another decade, we will be about 1/3 of the total milk in the world. So this will not necessarily come from more number of cows, more number of cattle, but improvement in productivity. So the announcement of a blueprint being made for a comprehensive dairy development program in the country indeed is a very welcome step for all the milk producers in the country, and more than 10 crore families in India depend on dairy for their livelihood. And milk is also the largest agricultural crop of India. So a combination of all these three sounds very good for the support which will be given by the government in improving the productivity of the large number of cattle that our farmers have. And so we indeed welcome this new announcement by the Honorable Finance Minister and the Government of India.
Jayanji, this is the cooperative movement. Amul is actually taking the cooperative movement into areas where there were none. You're doing something in Jammu and Kashmir, in Pulwama, I'm aware. You're doing something in the northeast. But is there cooperation amongst the cooperatives also? Because it's collectively a Bharat story.
Yes, absolutely. This is right. Because the replication of Amul model, Amul started way back in 1946. But the replication of this model in different states of the country under the Operation Flood program has made India the largest producer of milk in the world. More importantly, if you connect the new and the announcement made by the Honorable Prime Minister in the last year's Independence Day speech, which was reiterated by Honorable Finance Minister today, that if we talk about the forecasts that the government is currently looking at, be it the Garib, be it women, be it youth, or the Annadata or the farmer, cooperatives are the one unifying link for all these four. And the strong dairy cooperative movement, a strong cooperative movement in the country, the announcement of a formation of a new Ministry of Cooperation, which is 2 years back, which has resulted into multiple steps for strengthening the cooperative movement, and the support to be given to all the small and marginal farmers and the producers in the country will actually make this dream of Viksit Bharat very, very successful.
True, because nearly 70 products, not just milk, affiliated, milk derived, dairy derived products which are there, more than 70. If Bharat can become one of the top manufacturers across at least even 30 or 40 of these products, we'd have a huge story that we can take to the world. Ravi Saxena, retail and consumer durable expert, are you looking forward to that happening? And does this vote on account give you confidence to look forward to what could come in July?
Yeah, absolutely. I look at the budget very positively. First, it's a non-political budget. The government has stayed away from making any politically sensitive SOPs announcements, which kind of displays the confidence of the government in itself and its probable re-election. And they have presented a very positive picture about that. The second thing is almost every single item was towards Viksit Bharat, towards the developmental belief that the government has had. And also the times that we are living in, as you said earlier in the show, that in a world which is surrounded by wars and misery and deflation, India is the bright spot. And I think the budget was, without making it very overt or over the top, it was a very positive picture portrayed in that direction. So absolutely, I see it that way. And particularly, there are many things regarding our industry, which is retail and consumer sector, which are positive. Home appliances, that is our sector, and the addition of new homes, 2 crore new homes have been announced, and we all know that when a person moves away from a hut or a rented small premise into their own home, the confidence level to invest in appliances increases multifold and has a multiplier effect on the economy. 10 million solar installations in homes, making them net producers of electricity, saving that essential 15,000 rupees per annum for them. It means a lot, because in 15,000 per annum, you can fill your home with appliances, and when you are not concerned about kitne watt electricity kharch ho gayi. That is a very key element. So absolutely it will happen. Just to give you a little insight, the adoption of kitchen appliances in the country today is in less than 20% homes.
Correct.
A simple mixer grinder is in 35% homes, which means 2/3 of India does not even have the most essential first product that people buy when they start cooking at home, which is a mixer grinder. So one can imagine that when these people who don't have their own homes and are struggling for electricity or paying the bill, when they come into this fold, it is going to really boost this sector.
But is that a consumption problem, Raviji, or is it a manufacturing and distribution issue?
No, it's not at all a manufacturing problem, because I believe in the spirit of the Indian entrepreneur. So earlier in the program, it was mentioned that regarding solar panels, that why is there a high customs duty?
Right.
My belief is there should be a high customs duty, because the way I have seen the Indian entrepreneurs produce in India, make in India in the last 4 years, post-COVID, post-Galvan, it's unbelievable. We used to import, because we are a high-end brand. We used to import a lot of our products from Europe, Korea, even China. And I can tell you now, 3/4 of our production, actually about 83% of our goods are manufactured in India. And this I couldn't have fathomed 3 years ago. The vendor ecosystem has gotten developed. And it has gotten developed not because of high customs duties, but because of non-tariff barriers, which have motivated people to bring first the semi-knockdown kits, then the completely knockdown kits and assemble in India. And the moment that starts, people start applying their mind. What else can I do? Which mold can I make here? Which screw, which part, which PCB I can manufacture here? And before you know it, 70-80% of the product is being made in India. So the vendor ecosystem is absolutely booming. The manufacturing sector is beginning to boom. We can see the green shoots. I think this will just multiply. And these kind of supports in infrastructure, logistics, they will all go on to help it.
Well, Gulzar was also saying phased manufacturing as a strategy, and he said make the customs duty on the import of raw materials. Lower that, lower that, so that you can make it here at a cheaper cost. The full kit or the actual panel, you have high customs duty levies there, that's all right. But at least the raw material and the other aspects, you can reduce it and encourage phased manufacturing. Prashant Pitti?
Look, I can talk about my industry. It's not like that. The raw material or the finished goods have the same level of duty, which in our industry is 20%, and it works. it works, because when you are importing only 20-30%, basically the chips and some high-end parts in India, I think you can afford that duty. And even the Chinese suppliers are very smart. They know how to capture the market. They give you better rates also.
Right. Prashant Pedi, thank you for your patience. Before I come across to you, just quickly I want to ask Jayanji. Jayanji, by when will Bharat be ready to export milk and dairy products?
No. India is exporting, and Amul is also exporting to more than 50 countries. The key thing in international business is the lower prices in the international market, thanks to subsidies offered by several countries. Now, in our case, we have to see that our farmers get a good and a remunerative price of milk, and we don't import, which is what is subsidized or dumped into our country. So this is a fair balance we need to take. When I said India is the largest producer of milk in the world, it also means India is also the largest consumer of milk in the world.
Yes.
So the Atmanirbhar story in milk is one of the shining examples, and you could see the resilience of this entire supply chain even during the worst period of COVID and subsequently the wars and other things which happened. But there was not a shortage of any quantity of milk in the country anywhere. So this is where our story is. And encourage local production, encourage local consumption, create a market for the branded products in different parts of the world. And this is how the story grows.
Because the Doodh story is a big story for us. It's also become a pain point for certain nations who want the dairy market and access to the dairy market. And Bharat has said, no, this is our own and we are going to develop it ourselves and we're not going to open it up. So even in the free trade agreement, it is 98%. That 2% left with certain nations is this entire dairy market. But Prashant Piti, ease my trip. Not to Maldives, but to other destinations, including Lakshadweep. How do you look at the vote on account and perhaps the impending budget in July?
No, Anand, firstly, I echo the same thoughts as Mr. Jayan and Mr. Ravi has shared. We wholeheartedly welcome this interim budget. Government has not done anything super fancy because knowing that there is election coming. However, among the top 20 things if government has said in this interim budget, I think about 3 or 4 of them were related to tourism industry. And the emphasis on tourism clearly tells me that government for the first 5-6 years was more focused on Make in India. Now the government is more focused on travel in India as a campaign. With the connectivity of the ports to the Lakshadweep and Andamans, with talking about spiritual tourism, I believe that for example, if you only take about 10 years ago, there were only about 20 to 25,000 tourists who were going to Banaras on daily basis. Now that number has jumped to 5 lakh on daily basis. Now, even if, a person spends 1,000 rupees in that city, just bare minimum 1,000 rupees per day, we are talking about humongous amount of money coming to Banaras for infrastructure development as a growth factor for that particular city. Similarly, if we start having such impetus for various locations, tourist locations, which are sort of a hidden gem but not created so much, we really believe that Ayodhya will easily surpass Banaras in next couple of years. Ayodhya should see about 10 lakh tourists on daily basis.
अभी तो 7 दिन में 13 लाख हो गए.
But that number is basically going to plateau or decline after some time. So the steady state number which we are anticipating is about 10 lakh tourists on daily basis. What the number should look like. So clearly, and Ayodhya could actually become the next Vatican city for the world, not just for the India but for the world. And the other point which they talked about.
So there are consultants, there are real estate people, there are investors, everybody is sitting here. I think all of you should say, like, we'll not only send the tourists up to Ayodhya or connect them, but we'll also start building infrastructure so that they have places to stay. Because there are now 10 cities that have come up to facilitate the Pran Pratishtha, but those 10 cities cannot thrive and survive and hold the kind of thing. So that's where the infrastructure aspect comes. Jayanji, Raviji and also Prashant, if you would please stay on with us. It's a great conversation. I just want to bring in some of our silent partners in the mix, sitting in the studio also to join in on the conversation. Gautam Chikarmane, do you want to take this forward? Encouraging words coming in from certain entrepreneurs. Yes.
No,
you made a lot of notes, so let me ask you.
I was just reading the budget. It's now available. So I was just reading the budget and I'm very happy to see some changes. One is that corporation tax as a percentage of the budget has increased from 15% to 17%.
Okay.
That talks about tax
Good,
compliances.
Huh.
Income tax has increased from 15% to 19% of the budget. That's a very, very big deal. And together, and GST is increased marginally by 1 percentage point. This is a very, very big deal. But this is nothing compared to what's happened on the borrowing side. From 34% of the budget, the borrowings are now down to 28%. I think that is going to impact inflation. All the inflationary expectations will come down. And yet the government is able to do what it wants to do with this kind of public finances. And if this trend continues in July and next year, I think we are in a very good situation.
Yeah, anything you would like to exchange with what Ravi and Prashant would had to say? Hemal, Gulzar? Yeah.
No, I think as he mentioned in terms of the increase, and always remember, the direct tax increase is always a good sign as compared to indirect tax. So I'm quite happy with indirect tax increasing because then it impacts everybody in an equal manner, a poor man as well as a rich man. But the direct tax moving by 19%, I think is a good sign for an economy and our buoyancy, tax buoyancy.
So there is more tax compliance that's happening. Raviji was talking about the solar panels and the customs duty. He says, I think there should be strong customs duty. Gulzar, you want to weigh in on that?
No, so I think ethos are same because everybody wants to manufacture in India. And we need to build such an ecosystem so that that the reliance on import is reduced to a great extent. But as I said, I stand by what I said, that there has to be a method to this entire process, and you need to actually weigh in the demand supply gap. Right. Otherwise, it's going to impact the ambitious plans that government might have about growth, manufacturing, etc. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. Overall, yes, manufacturing is something that generates a lot of employment for the people. It actually creates infrastructure. It again employment, revenue. So it's like a ripple effect on the economy, and therefore we are all aligned. My point was limited to having a phased approach by looking into demand
and
supply
having
gap.
a plan to it.
Add to his one point, sorry, and then is just a point that you made also earlier on the offshore wind farm. I think that is a good step because from a energy perspective, from a renewable, let's say, we started with wind, we are good in solar, and therefore all the good sites, are already taken, the prices are. India with a wonderful coastline, frankly, we have not really tapped the offshore wind farm. And I think with the government planning to support that, if you go back in days, even the solar was priced at, 17 rupees against 5, and there was a generation-based incentive of 12 rupees given. I think somewhere on the offshore wind farm, the support that the government will give with the wonderful coastline we have will go a long way in the renewable energy targets that we have set for ourselves.
True. I think Prashant Pitti and Jayan Mehta have just dropped off. We'll try and see if they are there. Ravi is still with us. Coming to you, Ravi, in just a bit. Yes, Nirupama.
No, actually, because I think Rahul was asking also earlier about the subsidy. So I looked at it. Interestingly, I think the figures to look at are the fuel subsidy. If you see 2022, the spend was actually about 6.8 thousand crores as far as fuel subsidy. The budget estimates for this year, 23-24, was 2,200 crore. Revised estimate went up from 2,200 to 12,240. So look at the jump in terms of what has happened in 1 year of what they estimated as fuel subsidy and what has happened. And for next year, the estimates are about 11,000 or 12,000 crore. All the other subsidies, whether it's fertilizer or food, we've seen a systematic reduction, which is very good. But with fuel subsidy, this is actually one of the first times I've seen such a gross mismanagement of estimate in terms of subsidy.
No, but that was also, you would also say it's an extraneous circumstance because of the Russia-Ukraine war, the oil compulsions that we had in terms of, and now we've got a problem in with
I think
Iran
so, and I think that's what has.
So it's like war all around, and we are the biggest importers of fuel.
I agree. So coming back to that, so I think that's the justification, and rightfully so because of what has happened. But what is interesting is, given even this kind of increase, you are still able to actually stick to your fiscal deficit target of about 5.8%. It's not bad, and the next currently at 5.8, and next year it's 5.1. So you're not actually looking at a very significant jump or reduction. It's very phased and very good. So I think it would be very doable in terms of what they want
the
to do.
total subsidies are down from 7% to 6%.
Huge.
That's another big
Huge
thing,
amount.
Anand.
As are the
because
central
subsidies
sector
generally
schemes.
tend to go up, and here we are seeing a consistently down from 986. Okay, it was low in 2021, then it jumped, and now we are back to the 6% mark.
6%.
I think this is another healthy.
So there is a reduction in subsidies, except for perhaps in fuel,
That's
where
Which
there's
is
a huge up.
understandable.
Raviji, final question with you. Let me ask you, manufacturing, is there enough of a thrust that's happening? Is there enough and more manufacturing that's happening? Because for Bharat to become a Viksit Bharat and to be known as one of the powerful economies of the world, we have to be very strong manufacturing hub. Are we in the right direction?
Well, absolutely, Anand. I totally believe in that. I've been saying that for years. We have been talking about growth of service sector. And my stance has been that, India is too large to be supported just by services sector or a trading sector. Manufacturing has to be our core. And I was the happiest when this government started talking about Make in India, because I know that we live in chaos. As Indians, our strength is to be able to build things out of chaos. And while I hear Gulzar Saab saying that, there has to be a method to the madness, but we are used to this. I think the Indian entrepreneurs will create infra out of madness, and, they will be able to. And there is no right time, because, there is a right time and a wrong time for everybody. Whatever time you take the decision, people are in different phases. Absolutely. But I'll tell you a couple of things which I think government must do. One is PLI. I think PLI scheme is wonderful.
Right.
There used to be a lot of tax benefits based on geography, state-based. They have reduced by and large now over the last 2 decades. PLI is taking over, but PLI is limited to a few high-end sectors. I think manufacturing should not be limited to just a few high-end sectors like, chip design or chip manufacturing or telecom or mobile manufacturing.
It needs to be opened up. Ravi, I'm interrupting you because I'm just taking it across to Shivani, who's got two very important guests with her at the CII Hub. Over to you, Shivani.
Thanks a lot for that. Let me introduce two prominent industry voices joining me on two particular focus areas for the government. One is infrastructure and the other is renewable energy, and both were actually spoken about quite a bit. I'm joined with Deepak Shetty, Chairman, CII Infrastructure Council and CEO and MD, JCB India. With me is also Vishali N. Sinha, co-founder and chairperson, Sustainability Renew, a member of CII as well. Mr. Shetty, if I can begin with you. Capital expenditure, 11.1% growth, 11 lakh crore increase, 3.4% of the GDP. Happy with that, or were you expecting more?
I think I'm very happy. First of all, obviously there can be sometimes a debate about the number in particular, but we should not forget about the base. I think with the recent last 2 or 3 budget announcements, we have seen continuous focus on infrastructure development. And also there was a bit of a concern that an interim budget before the election, sometimes does it take the focus away? I think what the Honorable Finance Minister has conveyed very strongly is the focus on infrastructure development is there, is going to continue. And the other good thing about this particular announcement is she has touched about various other elements of infrastructure development. For example, when we talk about infrastructure, we think only about roads, highways. She has spoken about investment in the railway infrastructure, the dedicated freight corridors, which will not only help in improving the connectivity, but also reduce the cost of logistics. If you look at from the business point of view, the logistics cost in India is between 12 to 13%. In the Western world, it is 8%. So you can appreciate that how much of the competitiveness of the products from India and also the time from the farm to market, etc., will benefit.
So you're talking about the energy, mineral, cement, port connectivity, and high traffic corridors that the minister has
spoken about. The other element she has spoken about is the tourism sector.
Yes.
And we have seen globally the multiplier effect the tourism sector has on creation of infrastructure and also creation of jobs. So I think this is very positive. The one more item I wanted to speak about, many times when we talk about infrastructure development, we only look at the central government or the national highways, etc. But I think the state governments also play a very important role. We have seen what has happened through the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, etc. The whole creation of rural infrastructure and the 75,000 crore support to the state governments, I'm sure part of that will be invested in creation of the rural infrastructure. So all the elements of infrastructure development have been covered. I will not talk about the green energy. I will leave it to Vaishali to comment on that.
Vaishali is the expert on that. A lot talked about. This has been a focus that the Prime Minister has made an international commitment on net zero by 2070. There's been offshore wind energy, classification, piped energy for households, e-vehicle support, and so much more. Blue economy being talked about. Again, tourism ties into that. How did you look at the entire scenario?
No, I think I was very pleased. I think unlike the weather outside, which has been grey, foggy and not very clear, I think the finance minister and our country's leadership is very clear about the direction in which they want to move. I think they've been quite clear about it since the time they took over in 2014. If I look at the renewable energy space and the climate energy transition area, I think India has been a margdarsha to the world. And I think it makes us very proud when we go out. It's made people like us, entrepreneurs like us, go out and do our work, execute, because we are in an environment where there are enabling policies. In this budget, I just felt that it was just a continuation of what has been good. So, and
the vision is there. Of course, a lot of the details will come possibly in the full budget, which is
obviously this is an interim budget. But what I heard was, as you rightly pointed out, it was Muft Bijli. It sounds lovely and it is very nice because you see at a policy level we've been doing well, especially at the national level. How we engage the subnational, how we engage individuals for the life mission. I think these are steps which will take us in that direction. And for example, so rooftop solar for 1 crore individuals, which will save them about 15 to 18 odd thousand per month is not a small amount. It is a small amount from the point of view of the kind of large impact it has, because it will help people think sustainability, walk sustainability, adopt sustainability. So that has been great. The viability gap funding for the offshore wind area has been pretty significant. These are incentives which are given to sort of kick-off sectors, right? And so the perception so far has been that offshore is very expensive, and it's a right perception for India. Such initiatives will help kickstart this area. So that was a nice sort of announcement. I think there were other announcements around biomanufacturing and foundry, etc. I think biomass related. So I think all of those things show that ye ek hara bhara budget hai. So
Hara Bhara Viksit Bharat.
Viksit Bharat. Right? Yeah.
So all of that vision ties in. But can I just ask you, because you're a NASDAQ listed company, how is the world looking at India? Because most populous country in the world, looking for large growth and high growth very quickly, a lot of pressure on such developing economies. How is the world looking at India when it comes to green energy and renewable energy?
The world, as I said earlier on as well, is looking at India as a very inviting, progressive, committed country, which is one of the fastest growing even in the renewable space. If you look at our metrics, I mean, when we started, I think we were at about 75 gigawatts of goals, and now we're talking about 500 gigawatts. We're talking from 15 gigawatts per year generation to 50 gigawatts generation. I'm not sure if there's any other comparable country, developing anyone who has these commitments. And it's not only for India, but as you pointed out in your introduction, it is the commitment to integrate a global kind of energy landscape where we all work in a mutually beneficial manner. So your one world, one sun, all of that.
One world, one future, one family. Everything ties in.
And also one grid, one sun. So there are lots of these jargons which I love in the budget, and I think there have been quite a few of these.
Speaking of jargons, this government has been very good at it. Nothing wrong with that. This budget was also about presenting a report card of the last 10 years. Mr. Shetty, what is your report card to the government for the last 10 years? Because continuation is the big theme. They're very confident. They've not done any big, announcements, nothing populist that one can, grab at. Exuding confidence that they'll do more as they go along. They don't need to do anything extra right now. Your report card for the last 10 years?
I think 10 years back, there was a thought, there were announcements, but one was a little hesitant to think that, will this be translated? I think last 10 years have shown us that things get translated on the ground, whether it is the roads, the airports, the connectivity, etc. that we have seen. And if you also take yourself a little away, also the health of the economy. JCB is a British company. We have invested 44 years back in India, and every year our investment is growing in India compared to any other part of the world, which is again tells you how positive the global investor is. But if you look at the key elements of the budget, whether it is the GDP growth, whether it is, and it is not the government talking about it, the latest IMF report continues to be the fastest growing economy, but also the health of that growth. It is not, the growth is not happening taking your eye away from fiscal deficit as 5.1% was spoken about, or the inflation which has been brought under control. And particularly if you look at what's happening in the geopolitical arena and considering our dependence on imported crude, etc., I think maintaining this discipline from the fiscal side, I think is very positive. So overall, if you ask me, from 10 years back to now, I think it has been a spectacular journey. But I can only say that there's still so much to do in the country that it's very heartening to see that the focus on infrastructure is going to continue for next few years.
Yeah, that certainly has been a commitment made by the government. 2047, India has to be a developed economy. The finance minister said the next 5 years are going to be years of unprecedented growth. That's the promise that the government is making. On that note, back to you in the studio.
Well, we got Sanjeev Srivastava and Naresh Trehan also should be joining us. Dr. Naresh Trehan and Kapil Mittal, international tax expert, with us at this point. So quickly, let me just bring in Kapil Mittal and Sanjeev Srivastava, and then our guests in studio will take their thoughts also. Your thoughts, Kapil Mittal, are we on the right track? Gautam Chikkarmani made some interesting observations. The government spending from direct tax has gone up by about 4%. Correct me if I'm wrong. 15 to 19%, Gautam?
From 15 to 19%.
15 to 19%. 4% it's gone up. The GST collections averaging 1.64 lakh crores every month. So Nirmala Sitharaman ji is saying all is well. Kuch abhi nothing now. I'm not touching any of the taxations.
So this was what was expected from the budget actually. So we were not expecting that there would be any tax or direct or indirect tax announcement going to be happen. Yeah, there was some because we are Indians, we expect that there must be some kind of a freebies or something to get from the government, but government made it clear that this budget is interim and there would be no changes in the tax slab or others.
Please hold your thoughts, Kapil. PM Modi is speaking.
लेकिन ये बजट इंक्लूसिव और इनोवेटिव बजट है. इस बजट में कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है. ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा. निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है. इस बजट में 2047 के विकसित भारत की नींव को मजबूत करने की गारंटी है. मैं निर्मला जी और उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं. साथियों, इस बजट में युवा भारत की युवा आकांक्षाओं का, भारत की यंग एस्पिरेशंस का प्रतिबिंब है. बजट में 2 महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय ले गए हैं. रिसर्च और इनोवेशन पर 1 लाख करोड़ रुपए का फंड बनाने की घोषणा की गई है. बजट में स्टार्टअप्स को मिलने वाली टैक्स छूट के विस्तार का भी ऐलान किया गया है. साथियों, इस बजट में फिस्कल डेफिसिट को नियंत्रण में रखते हुए कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर को 11,11,111 करोड़ रुपए की ऐतिहासिक ऊंचाई दी गई है. अर्थशास्त्रियों की भाषा में कहें तो एक प्रकार से स्वीट स्पॉट है. इससे भारत में 21वीं सदी के आधुनिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के निर्माण के साथ ही युवाओं के लिए अनगिनत रोजगार के नए अवसर तैयार होंगे। बजट में वंदे भारत स्टैंडर्ड की 40,000 आधुनिक बोगियां बनाकर उन्हें सामान्य यात्री ट्रेनों में लगाने का ऐलान किया गया है। इससे देश के अलग अलग रेल रूट पर करोड़ों यात्रियों में आरामदायक यात्रा का अनुभव बढ़ेगा। साथियों, हम एक बड़ा लक्ष्य तय करते हैं, उसे प्राप्त करते हैं और फिर उससे भी बड़ा लक्ष्य अपने लिए तय करते हैं। गरीबों के लिए हमने गांवों और शहरों में 4 करोड़ से अधिक घर बनाए। अब हमने 2 करोड़ और नए घर बनाने का लक्ष्य रखा है। हमने 2 करोड़ महिलाओं को लखपति दीदी बनाने का लक्ष्य रखा था। अब इस लक्ष्य को बढ़ाकर 3 करोड़ लखपति दीदी बनाने का कर दिया गया है। आयुष्मान भारत योजना ने गरीबों की बहुत मदद की है। अब आंगनवाड़ी और आशा वर्कर, उन सबको इस योजना का लाभ मिलेगा। साथियों, इस बजट में गरीब और मध्यम वर्ग को एम्पावर करने, उनके लिए आय के नए अवसर बनाने पर भी बहुत जोर दिया गया है। रूफटॉप सोलर अभियान में 1 करोड़ परिवारों को सोलर रूफटॉप के माध्यम से मुफ्त बिजली प्राप्त होगी। इतना ही नहीं, सरकार को अतिरिक्त बिजली बेचकर लोगों को 15 से 20 हजार प्रति वर्ष की आय भी होगी और ये हर परिवार को होगी। साथियों, आज जिस इनकम टैक्स रेमिशन स्कीम की घोषणा की गई है, उससे मध्यम वर्ग के करीब 1 करोड़ लोगों को बड़ी राहत मिलेगी। पिछली सरकारों ने सामान्य मानवी के सिर पर दशकों से ये बहुत बड़ी तलवार लटका कर रखी थी। आज इस बजट में किसानों के लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और बड़े निर्णय लिए गए हैं। नैनो डीएपी का उपयोग हो, पशुओं के लिए नई योजना हो, पीएम मत्स्य संपदा योजना का विस्तार हो और आत्मनिर्भर ऑयल सीड अभियान हो। इससे किसानों की आय बढ़ेगी और खर्च कम होगा। मैं एक बार फिर सभी देशवासियों को इस ऐतिहासिक बजट के लिए शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
So once again, Prime Minister underlining Yuva, Garib, Mahila and Kisan. These are the 4 pillars for whom he is going to work, and his policies are structured around in Bharat, is something that he has continued to say, and he says that this budget also reflects the concerns and the ability to try of this efforts of this government to help these 4 categories: Kisan, Mahila, Yuva and of course the Garib, or those who do not have. The Mudra loan aspect, Nirupama ji was talking about, very, very important, where he says that women have benefited. And nearly what was the number he said?
So of 43 crore loans that have gone on Mudra, 30 crores have actually gone for women. So that's about 70% of your total Mudra loans, as per budget document, seems to have been deployed to women. Interestingly, because these are non-collateralized loans, an average NPA, as per some figures, I think in a Rajya Sabha, to answer Rajya Sabha question, as of August 2023, was about 2.5%, which is not bad at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually great women empowerment if you look at it in terms of the amount of loan that's going and the fact that it's actually targeted so well at women, which wasn't Of course, there was an intention, but I think it's done.
It
far
also
better
shows
than
a
even what
value
was
system
intended.
that the person on ground who's taking the loan is so conscientious that they want to be correct about repaying that loan also. So the repayment, that's why the NPAs is at 2.5% despite having no collaterals.
No, but also interestingly, see, remember in most cases for credit to women, the collateral has always been a huge impediment.
Yeah.
In most cases, women don't have collateral and therefore have not been able to actually take loans. So non-collateralized loan up to 10 lakhs of whatever category you choose, and that they've actually made use of it is fantastic. And as you say, with the commitment to
and this
repay.
30 crore is distributed of over nearly 1 crore of women. I think that's what he also said. Now, more than 1 crore of women have actually benefited out of it. So I'm just saying it's small amounts.
No, 30 crore loans have actually gone to
30 crore
women.
loan, 30 crore loans have gone to women. Correct. So, so I'm just saying that the amount of the withdrawal also from these people, these women, on an average is not more than 10 to 20 lakhs, 5 to 10 lakh rupee loans is what they are looking at.
10 lakhs is your limit for mudra anyway, so that's
that
what
5
you're
to
at.
10 lakh is enough to set them up in life, and it is getting that grassroots person who was, just flirting around with the poverty line and sometimes has been able to push that up. This entire aspect of multi-dimensional poverty which is being spoken about and the government, are you people votaries of the same? We have Sridhar Prasad, we've got Sanjeev Srivastava and Kapil Mittal who we interrupted. We'll go back to all of them and in just a bit. But yes, Gautam and Hemal, Gautam. Multi-dimensional poverty.
I think that's a very complicated thing and multi-dimensional. The fact that it has come down is a remarkable thing, and this follows an almost zero, less than 1% fall, 1% of extreme poverty as defined by World Bank, $1.9 a day spending. So I think poverty eradication has been and continues to be on its way. It's just that the line of poverty will now start rising. So instead of $2 a day, we may move to $5 a day and try to eradicate that. From there, we'll move to $10 a day and try to eradicate that. This is completely in tune with the Vikasit Bharat, $20,000 per capita income, $30 trillion economy by 2047. And I think this, what I don't see in the budget, by the way, explicitly stated, although it's there in the underlying, is growth.
Growth.
All past budgets, there was a strong impetus on growth and this will grow and that will grow. I don't see that right now. Perhaps welfare is the bigger currency of economic discourse in this budget. But I think taking everything into consideration, this growth has removed poverty. India is now a clear case
Everybody
study.
else is talking about the growth story, so the government is saying, let me talk about welfare. I am saying that's also the politics of it and the optics of it. IMF is saying growth ho raha hai. Economic survey report is saying growth ho raha hai. Everybody is saying growth ho raha hai. Why should the government say growth ho raha hai?
I think what it does is, it brings the argument that growth removes poverty back into the forefront.
It is back into the flavor. Sridhar Prasad, your thoughts, sir?
Interesting here because the 4 words which you guys, it's there in the budgets, I'm just clubbing them into 2 buckets, which is the poor and the annadata on one bucket and women and youth on the other bucket, right? So all the benefits and the 1 lakh crore for entrepreneurship is coming under the buckets of women and youth. Then it becomes an opportunistic budget because the market is opened up for the poor and the farmers. And anything which you do in these 2 buckets by the 1 lakh crore recipients, whether it is youth or women, that translates to the growth aspect of what is being spoken about here. Because anything and everything which is spoken needs a massive amount of digitization, needs a massive amount of support from startups which are far more nimble than the traditional machinery. Right. So that in that lens, if you're putting it right, you're actually encouraging entrepreneurship in 2 dimensions: youth and women. So when money is given to women, like the numbers which were spoken earlier, I'm presuming that a lot of that is into very small scale entrepreneurship.
Correct.
And that translates to largely in the agri sector, or it is eradicating poverty. Right. Even the solar situation which is spoken about here, right, that requires a large machinery of a digital enablement and a physical infrastructure. Now, startups in the world today, in the country, should be thinking like, okay, made for India. Very simple. This has been spoken many times. But have the confidence that let's make for India because government is putting money in these 4 buckets. Now, where do you align is your choice. And I think this is the first time, I mean, though it is not synced well, but agri-tech and agri-finance as a startup space is going to be really big for us.
Yes.
Because all the money going to Kisan, with very less of digitization in that space, the agri-tech and agri-finance or agri-fintech, if I can use that phrase, could be the buzzword for India now. Agri-fintech.
No, not just that. Recently, if my memory serves me right, the government did announce that they're going to do a massive skilling program in the rural areas as far as drone technology is concerned, seeding, and they're going to encourage, and this is again focused on Yuva and women. So that's that bucket that they're talking about, and they want to encourage more and more people to get into a startup space or an entrepreneurial space after they are skilled in managing a drone, operating it, servicing it, and also then using it to try and seed farms or take care of the farming needs.
Absolutely.
So this is something which has been there, and somewhere one of the experts was saying the government doesn't say a lot on the day of the budget. They make all the announcements before it or once in a quarter. Sanjeev Srivastava, your thoughts?
Well, no. I think it's a budget which spells out the direction of the government. Maybe they don't mention growth, but the big capex on infra which has been there, and this 1 lakh crore for new ideas or startups or innovation, that's a very good idea on next to low or nil interest rate. But also it's an election budget. So the 4 dhuris on which the budget stands, or what the Prime Minister's bird's eye view is, that you were just mentioning Garib, Yuva, Mahila. They are also big constituencies for an election. So 2 crore houses for middle classes, all those things are eyed for elections. At the same time, what has been done in the budget, because this was not a proper budget, this was vote on account, there have been no direct, indirect taxation measures announced. So all that has been deferred for after the elections. So this is something which, so the economy continues to move in the direction that this government has already shown in the last few years, that direction has been maintained and sustained, and there have been welfare measures announced with an eye on the election. Other than that, I think we'll have to wait for the real budget. Like somebody just said, I think Anand, you only just said, that budget, gone are the days when budget was a big one-ticket event. So it's all through the year that you can announce policy measures. But the government is refrained from doing that. So there were a lot of expectations on taxation, which, I have no pretensions of being an economist like a Gautam or my other fellow panelists. But for the common middle class, again, there is, you just keep waiting and expecting something to happen. I really don't understand the meaning that if one moves to new tax regime, then the limit has been raised to 5 to 7 lakhs. Obviously, a lot of people did not move to the new tax regime because the old one is attractive. So, but the middle class really hasn't got much. I think the entrepreneur class and the growth impetus, which Gautam was mentioning, that he doesn't see much growth, the kind of capex and the infra push the government is promising, ultimately that will hopefully lead to growth.
Gautam's point was that the growth is underlined. The growth is an understated aspect, and it is there perennially. It's a parallel line of thought. It's not the most said line of thought. Welfare is the one where the spotlight is, but in the shadows, growth remains. So that's what Gautam was trying to say. Kapil Mittal, you agree that the middle class, perhaps, who has been left asking for more, or perhaps being given the carrot कि भाई हमारी सरकार आएगी तो जुलाई में आप उम्मीद बना के रखो?
आप दे दोगे क्या वहाँ?
So what you will rather say that we were not expecting much from this budget actually. So this was very much clear from government thought and from other election point of view also, that they are not going to give much respect to direct or indirect taxation to the middleman or to the lower middle class or to the salaried persons. So we were expecting something that there may be some slight benefit or freebies kind of things would be there, but those are not come into picture. What we see that government is trying to explain what they have done in the last 10 years. This is kind of this budget, interim budget is kind of a report card which they have published and shown that in the last 10 years they have done this or that. For example, they mentioned that FDI inflow has been doubled from 300 US dollar billion US dollar to 600 US billion dollar. So government only tried to explain that they are focused with respect to future growth, and they also Madam FM also include in her speech that India next 5 years for India is a developing development 5 years. So from that point of view, they are focusing
the fact of the matter is the middle class, which is also now paying more tax. If the tax bracket and the tax spread has gone up, and I'm bringing it back to Gautam Chikarbane, and then I'll bring in Sridhar also on this. Yeah, Gautam, in the morning broadcast, you were talking when Zaka and Rahul were around, you said everybody should be charged a flat 1,000 rupees, and then uske baad, depending upon their slabs of income, they should be taxed more. Now, this is a phenomenal thought process, because that means this is huge amount of revenue given our population base. So if 100 crore people, let's exclude about 25 to 30 crore who cannot pay that 1,000 rupees also. Say 100 crore people are made to pay 1,000 rupees every year as a flat fee, and then the rest of the tax slabs happen. That's a huge amount of money that will accrue to the government and the exchequer. But are we very far from there? The other aspect is, in every budget with this sarkar, the middle class has said, yaar, hame to kuch nahi diya.
7 लाख रुपए आपका टैक्स नहीं देना चाहिए, इससे ज़्यादा क्या मिडिल क्लास को चाहिए, और उस पर भी the tax rates are so low. My point in everybody paying tax is more a rhetoric than a precise that everybody must pay. What I'm trying to say is, every budget raises the base on which the tax ought to be paid. At some point we have to end. There used to be a discussion some years ago of widening the tax base.
Right.
How will you widen the tax base if you are narrowing the policy stance upon which that tax base is going to rest? If every time the budget is going to increase the money, by the time people keep entering that 7 lakh, 7 will become 8. So I think it will become a fewer and fewer number of people paying taxes for a larger and larger number of people who don't. And my point is not that government is going to get a huge amount of money. It's statistically insignificant. It's just as a participant in India's growth story. You can't just keep taking things that India is providing growth, so you make a profit here. India is providing growth, you get a job there, you set up a business there. I think we need to also be participants in the tax paying thing. That was my point. We need to broaden the tax base.
Right. Sridhar Prasad, coming to you in just a bit, just quickly going across to Shivani at CII. Yes.
Thanks a lot for that. I have a power-packed panel now to take forward some of the highlights of the budget announced by Nirmala Sitharaman. Interim budget, so nothing big bang as most are expressing, but still lots to look forward to. Let me welcome with me Dr. Pawan Goenka, Chairman InSpace, and also Mr. Kunal Behl, Chairman CIS Startup Council and co-founder Snapdeal. I'm also joined through video conferencing, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, past President, CIA Chairman, CIA Public Policy Council and Chairman from Hero Enterprise. Mr. Munjal, if I may begin with you, of course everybody was looking at continuity. In terms of capital expenditure, there has been continuity expressed by the government. Are you happy with what the government has expressed, or did you expect more?
So I'm happy with 2 or 3 things. One, that the government has not made this into an election year budget. As CB had said yesterday, they have done a popular budget and not a populist budget, in the sense focusing on youth, on women, on farmers, on infrastructure, focus very tightly on maintaining the fisc. And that was something which we were very concerned about, to ensure that India's improved rating does not slip back. So I have to say full marks on that account, that there is no excessive spend, but the spend is very targeted at improving logistics and transportation by railways, on focused areas, on helping reduce disputes in the tax system at the bottom end. When the amounts are small, they've given a complete pass-by to all the old disputes. So I think all in all, very creditable not to get tempted with a budget around the corner to do any big splurge. And in fact, continue down the road. Actually, in a sense, it looks like a government with full confidence that they are going to be spending, announcing the budget the year after as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that confidence showed in many, many ways. Dr. Goenka, Mr. Munjal, just be with me. I have two guests with me here in person. Mr. Goenka, Mr. Munjal was expressing the fact that good budget, but not a populist budget, shows confidence that the government has, that they don't need to do anything big in terms of an election approaching. For you particularly, that 1 lakh crore rupee corpus that has been announced for long-term financing of research and innovation in sunrise sectors, did that stand out for you?
Yes, of course, it does. So first of all, let me reiterate that I couldn't hear what Sunil was saying, but fully agree with you. I mean, there's nothing populist in this budget, and it really is continuity and the confidence that the government is demonstrating. The 1 lakh crore corpus that has been put forward by R&D, I think meets a long-term need that we had for longest time of how do you pull the private sector to do more R&D. One of India's problem is that most of the R&D expenditure happens by the government. Almost 2/3 of R&D expenditure is by the government, whereas in most advanced countries it's other way around, where 2/3 happens by private sector. So I think it's like giving it such a long-term interest-free corpus is almost giving away the money, free, right? So what they're saying is to the private sector, come, invest in R&D, we will support you.
Yes.
Right? And with that, if we really want to become the Viksit Bharat by 2047, it cannot happen without a significant advancement in R&D and innovation. And that's what it does. So I think it's a very big deal. Maybe most people won't realize the implication of that and the impact of that. But we'll have to see the details, of course, but I think it's going to make a huge difference.
And Kunal, added to that is the government's focus for deep tech industries plus defense. You focus a lot on the startup sector. Good news overall?
Absolutely. I feel that while everyone's calling it an interim budget, but there's enough in it for the startup economy, particularly given that, as Dr. Goenka was also saying, a lot of these sunrise sectors, particularly the startups in the sunrise sectors, these are incredibly long gestation period ideas. And getting equity financing is very challenging for these startups. And effectively this 50-year no interest, zero or low interest loan is effectively a grant in some ways. And that's what you need to catalyze these sunrise sectors, whether it's deep tech, biotech, space tech or defense tech, etc. Separately, we also feel that this is the announcement of the continued focus on EV is very encouraging. As an oil import dependent country, it is very critical that we continue to encourage the manufacturing and charging infrastructure of the EV industry, where also now we know a lot of startups are playing a critical role. So overall, the ambition of Viksit Bharat 2047, which, growing up, we've all heard of India being a developing country. Finally, we have our eyes set on becoming a developed country, and all these initiatives will work towards that.
No, absolutely. These are the sectors that are really going to propel India's growth. Mr. Munjal, how is the private sector looking at the government's focus on new sectors, tech sectors, sunrise sectors? Plus, what is your outlook on, for example, artificial intelligence that is being talked about so much as a disruptor, particularly for private businesses as well? Your outlook on all of that?
So I think it's most welcome. It is clear that technology is going to be the big game changer in the world. And as India wants to be a key player in the global economy, as we should be, first for our own internal needs, to be able to meet the needs of our population, to improve our standard of living of all Indians, you have no choice but to be competitive. And to do that, these are the technologies which are going to give us that ability to leapfrog. And you use some of the keywords like artificial intelligence and other technologies. And it is the big push into these areas which will make a big difference. And the government is clearly indicating that they are not just willing to put their money in infrastructure and grow digital infrastructure, but they want the private sector and the private enterprise to do the same. So I think this twin engine of firing both ends in the public sector and the private sector will certainly be a big help. I also like the approach they've taken on doing more with less, in a sense, allowing existing hospitals to populate more medical colleges. We have a need. So on the basic, we need to improve and enhance both capacity and quality of education, and healthcare. This is a fundamental need of all Indians. So they have focused on both. Education, I hope the implementation of the new education policy will take place in the coming years. On the healthcare, our biggest constraint is availability of talent, of doctors and nurses and paramedics. And they've actually done a very interesting tweak to allow you to put up more hospitals or more medical colleges or more medical college seats with the same capacity of hospitals. So I like this approach, and I think we need to take it across multiple sectors for India to get to where we want India to be. Direction is very, very good. It is now the ability to ramp up the pace, because while on the one hand, growth of 6-7% looks very good, but for a need for a country like ours, we need to grow upwards of 7 to 8 and upwards of this for the next 15 to 20 years to be able to meet aspirations of all Indians.
Yes, big challenge. He's talking about how we need 7 to 8% upwards of growth of that to meet our challenges, the most populous country in the world now. But particularly speaking about the space sector, for example, Mr. Goenka, there's artificial intelligence being talked about everywhere. And I heard someone talk about how business is a little bit wary of investing just yet because you don't know what's around the corner in terms of technology. Is there some sort of holding back on that front?
In the space sector?
In space or just overall in tech, you think, in the industry?
Look, it will be wrong for me to say no. Okay, it will be wrong for me to say no. But at the same time, there are enough people who are making bets on what one could sort of call deep tech, okay, which includes AI, which includes all the other buzzwords that you have for today. If you look at the space sector, which is perhaps the newest of the sunrise sector in some sense, even though it's a 60-year-old sector, but if you leave out what ISRO has been doing, rest of it is sunrise sector. And there, in the last 2 years, we have seen tremendous interest coming in by the startups, and we have 200 startups there. And now, slowly, the investors are also getting interested. And with 100 million plus of investment happening in the previous year and same thing the year before. So I think there is enough interest, but I wouldn't say everybody is sort of saying, let's go and do it immediately. That's my view, but he probably knows better in this than me.
Yeah, sure. Look, I feel that in technology, typically what happens is things start really slow and everyone's asking these questions, why is it not growing fast enough? And then suddenly it grows in geometric progression. And then it's arrived. And then it's ubiquitous. We've seen that as a country when it comes to smartphones, mobile internet, and digital transactions, the entire DPI. It's very slow, sluggish even, and then suddenly it is ubiquitous. We will see the same happen here.
Okay.
And I'm already seeing early signs of many startups really challenging the norm and not going only for excellence at an India level, but excellence at a global level.
That is something that the Prime Minister talks about quite prominently. Focus on space, focus on the private sector when it comes to technology, and focus on the future, which includes, of course, deep tech and artificial intelligence. Thanks a lot for our guests for joining us. A big thanks to Mr. Munjal as well. Back to you in the studio.
The Union Budget draws the roadmap to achieve PM Narendra Modi ji's vision of a developed Bharat by 2047. The budget speech sheds light on the milestones achieved by the Modi government in the last 10 years on its journey to make Bharat the foremost nation in every sector during the Amrit Kal. On the very foundation of these feats, the magnificent edifice of Viksit Bharat is being built. My heartfelt gratitude to Modi ji for leading the nation through this journey of excellence, and to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ji for the insightful budget speech. This is the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. We got about 4 minutes, 4 panelists, 1 minute each, starting with Nirupama Soundararajan. What is it that you expect, or what do you think is missing? If you want to read the details and the fine print.
Quickly, missing, I'll tell you 2 interesting things that I found. I think this was one of the first budgets to lay a lot of emphasis on tourism. I think that's fantastic because that's a huge revenue generator. I like the announcement on deep tech fund for defense, but I would wait for the details to see what they mean.
Yeah, how much fund is it and what deep tech
exactly,
is it?
And what is deep tech? What was missing, I think, for the first time was no mention of Northeast in anything. So I think that was completely missing, either in terms of allocations, what they're doing, development agenda, nothing. So Northeast was a huge missing piece. So I think that's my
Northeast work is in process already. The coastal lines were spoken about. Fisher folk were spoken about. Marine environment is spoken about. And that's our biggest coastline, which has not been spoken about often. But last 2-3 times, this has been a very strong mention to work with them. Yes, Gulzar.
So I think, the discussion Gautam mentioned about, there was no talk on the growth, right? But I think they have very clearly talked about how the economy has performed on various indicators. Declining CAD as percentage of GDP, declining unemployment rate, declining gross NPAs, rising volume of digital transactions, and then rising GST collections month on month, and finally fall in headline inflation. So these data and figures are, they are able to speak for themselves that there has been growth as well as development on all the counts. From what was missing, I think I would say that nothing much was expected from a taxation standpoint, but we were hoping some sort of a dispute resolution scheme that government could have announced on customs, because service tax, excise, income tax, all of that was announced in last few years, which has garnered revenue of 70,000 crore. So this is something that we were expecting could be announced, but let's wait till July when government comes back and then announces full-fledged budget.
Mari sarkar aayegi to karenge. So that's the political.
That's the confidence they have shown. That's the confidence they have shown.
Yeah, confidence they have shown, and I think that confidence is also important, because somewhere the messaging is, don't worry, we are going to be there. They want a lot of people. Perhaps industry sentiment was it that they wanted to see reassurance along with this entire continuity. Himal.
No, so I think continuity is good. According to me, no big bang changes is a good from an industry perspective. One thing, as you said, on the missing part is, which I alluded, is this concessional tax regime of 15% for manufacturing. I think that was a big incentive, which was lapsing on 31st March, and we were expecting it to be extended. I am still keeping my fingers crossed we may see some amendment coming in, but I think that's a big one. In order to make India a competitive market, manufacturing market, as compared to, let's say, Vietnam, Philippines and all other South Asian, I thought a 15% tax rate was a very good, attractive. I think we'll end up losing our competitiveness, especially at this time when the China Plus One strategy is and people are actively looking. We have heard about various, mobile phone manufacturers getting in, and if we don't retain that attractiveness, I think it's going to impact us.
It will take away our competitive edge. That's something that you're flagging off. Gautam Chikkarmani.
I'm wondering whether Nirmala Sitharamanji is taking away my job, because it's our job to analyze what the government did as a report card, etc. So what we have in budget, in the interim budget, is a report card of what they have done in the past 10 years and what they plan to do over the next 5. Jokes aside, I'm going to be dull, boring and macro. I'm just loving the fact that income tax as a percentage of the budget has increased by 4 percentage points. It's a very big deal. It's a very big deal. Corporation tax by 2 percentage points, and borrowings have fallen by 6 percentage points from 34 to 28. Just the enormity of these numbers, because in percentage points you may not be able to visualize them. Just the enormity. I see inflation, for instance, getting far more under control. As a result, interest rates falling. As a result, the capex that we've been groaning about since morning of private sector, which may come in from the full budget in July, will see a far more open, lower cost descent. So overall, I think I didn't expect much from this budget. I don't know who did and why. It is an interim vote on account. But from the point of view of what has been recorded and where they are going, the budget is perfectly fine.
So the numbers are encouraging, and one thing the Prime Minister also touched upon, a 1 lakh crore fund being created for innovation, sunrise sectors and research. Now, this is the right focus, ladies and gentlemen, and somewhere the indication is get your entrepreneurial hat on, not the Naukri hat on. Is there more to expect? We'll wait and see the politics of it in just a bit. But to all our panelists in the studio, fantastic. Thank you very much. To all our viewers, thank you for staying with us right through the morning and the afternoon. Hope you stay on with us through this budget day evening. Taking a very short break.
नहीं रखा जाता है। हम भी उसी परंपरा का निर्वाह करते हुए पूर्ण बजट नई सरकार बनने के बाद आपके समक्ष लेकर के आएंगे।
Thanks a lot for staying with our budget coverage here on CNN News 18. I'm joining you from the CII gathering in the national capital. You're joining the broadcast with me, Shivani Gupta, and I'm joined with none other than Mr. R. Dinesh, President, CII and Chairman, TVS Supply Chain Solutions Limited. Thanks a lot, Mr. Dinesh, for your time. Is there a lot of anticipation ahead of this budget, or is there an understanding this is a vote on account and therefore there are going to be mild expectations?
Thank you, Shivani. I think if you look at it, there is an expectation that there will be continuity.
Yes.
And that this will set the direction for the budget later, right? So for us, I think considering all the geopolitical issues which have been there, the biggest concerns was what is happening globally. So if I look at it in that context, I think India obviously is in a very, I would say the most ideal situation. So continuity and making sure that there is a clear direction being set for the future is how we look at this interim budget.
You're right about the global scenario. Of course, we're still recovering from the pandemic years. But ahead of this year, given how we've handled those concerns over the last year or so, what were the top industry concerns communicated to the government from yourselves?
No, I think we were actually expecting that the government will be able to manage this geopolitical scenario in three different ways, right? One is obviously managing the inflation, which I think between RBI and the Finance Ministry, they have been able to handle very well. Second was making sure that India remains insulated from the global crisis, so to say.
As much as possible.
As much as possible. You can never be completely insulated.
Yes.
Third, which I think was I would call it very deft handling of making sure that the fiscal deficit was maintained without really losing the focus on growth. So the focus
yes. No, go ahead.
The focus on growth and focus on inflation without affecting the fiscal deficit, I think, has been one of the best methods of handling this situation.
So you mentioned how India is in an ideal situation given what is happening, but there has been a lot of criticism of a few things as far as the Indian economy is concerned. Why do you say that we are in an ideal situation? I know that the global markers are very much in India's favor, and international agencies have of course appreciated India's efforts, plus the outlook is very positive. But ideal according to you, how so?
So I think it's very difficult to have I would call it a marker of an ideal, right? Because it's a moving goal. And expectations always keep changing. Once you have something, then you expect something more. But if you look at what has happened with the rest of the world, like I said, on these three factors of growth, inflation and managing, so to say, the fiscal deficit, every country has had the issues post coming out of COVID. India managed the COVID situation brilliantly. In fact, to our surprise, or to, I would say, the initial ask which we had, I think the government did not focus on consumer spending but made sure it spent on infrastructure. So if you look at why I believe this India is an ideal situation, is this focus on infrastructure has meant a big change in terms of both the factors, ease of doing business and cost of doing business. The logistics cost coming down supports manufacturing. So there is a domestic market. India is becoming more competitive, and when I mean more competitive, not just from business itself, but also from the digital public infrastructure which has been created. That for me is a very big differentiator from the rest of the world. That is the reason why I believe it's a very unique positioning today, or a unique opportunity today. On the geopolitical side, you have the rest of the world looking at India as a strategic trusted partner. You have Indian economy growing at a very good rate. And compared to the rest of the world, let us say, even the forecast for this year is 3.1% rest of the world. And here we are by IMF, and here we are speaking about, at least CII's view is it will be in excess of 7% in 25.
Right.
So if I keep all of these factors in mind, I think good domestic market, geopolitically trusted partner, a focus on cost and ease of doing business, I think you can't get any better than this.
You also talked about continuation, and you're absolutely right. Of course, the government has already showed a lot of confidence that they're going to present a full budget post the election. So that's of course on the political side. But I do want to ask you, if this government was to show its intent on those markers, plus markers, particularly the infrastructure spending and the control on the deficit, two of its highlight issues, do you expect that in this interim budget there will be that intent shown on both of these markers?
Yes, I believe so. I think this government has completely walked the talk in the past as well. So I think there would be obviously necessary support required for various other actions, which I'm sure there will be a direction about. I think the finance minister mentioned about, see, one of the other focus, or rather let me step back for a minute. One of the reasons why we have had very good growth is that there has been a focus on, I would call it the lesser group.
Thanks a lot for staying with CNN News 18. You're watching our continuous post-budget coverage. I'm Shivani Gupta. Joining me is Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, immediate past President, CII, and Chairman and Managing Director, Bajaj Finserv Limited. Sir, thanks a lot for your time. There is fiscal consolidation and lower projected borrowings for financial year 24-25, something the RBI will help keep inflation in check as well. Do you foresee the RBI responding to this in the next week's monetary policy meeting?
Well, I believe it's clearly a step in the right direction, and that and inflation moderating does arm the RBI to take a positive decision. We do know that the Fed has held rates yesterday, and the greater expectation is for rate cuts in the second half of the year. So yes, I don't have a crystal ball, but it'll be interesting to see whether RBI gets more proactive or stays a little bit more conservative and waits maybe for another cycle.
Right. Overall, the government has reiterated its commitment to fiscal, to lowering fiscal deficit. 5.8 revised, and the estimates to be 5.1, with a longer outlook to lower than 4.5. Your thoughts on that, along with doing everything that the government needs to do, including in this interim budget, increasing capex by 11.1%. How did you see the overall policy for the government?
The overall policy is one that is continues to be growth oriented. It's also one that is socially inclusive and, as you just correctly mentioned, fiscally prudent. And getting the right balance is not always easy, but they've clearly made a very strong attempt at that in this vote on account. Now, we do know that we are still living in a situation with significant external uncertainties, and India is that one bright spot. But we've still not seen private sector capex come up as high as it should, because again, the uncertainty ends up driving a certain amount of conservatism, and that's where the government continues to step in. That's positive. At the same time, aiming for a lower fiscal deficit in line with what the FM had set out a few years ago is very important, because India needs to get onto a stronger sovereign rating. As that happens, our overall cost of funds will come down. Keep in mind, we're still very much an economy which is what I call as a capex economy. We're still investing to build real assets for the future. We are not a Western economy which is a working capital economy. And as a result, we need to drive our interest rates down. A better sovereign rating helps all companies, and that can be a shot in the arm in coming years.
You know, the government has talked a lot about how 25 crore people have escaped multi-dimensional poverty. They've talked about, financial inclusion that has touched a lot many people's lives, particularly women. They've talked about how the average real income for the public has increased by 50%. Is a statement that the finance minister made. How do you look at the quality of life that has that the government has managed to deliver, and the promises that it is making on that front, keeping digital and financial inclusion as one of the parameters as well?
So, if you look at the last few years, post-COVID initially, they've directly put money and food in people's hands. And the digital public infrastructure that was created enabled them to do this seamlessly. I know when my staff goes home or talks to their family in their villages, they say in the last few years money comes into their accounts every month. It didn't come as clearly and easily in the past. So that is the first big step that they were able to take. Thereafter, if you see the number of measures that the government has taken with self-help groups for women, with ensuring improvement in quality of education on the ground, which as we know is also a state subject. So it is something that the states also have to align with, and a number of progressive states have done that. You overall improved the quality of education, also healthcare. You see the insurance for the poor, the products both on medical as well as on life. That has provided them with greater security. So there are a number of clear steps that the government is taking. And in the last 3 or 4 years, the massive outlay on public capex, this has a huge multiplier effect on jobs. And we are a country of the young. The one thing that we need year after year is more and more jobs. And to me, it's important to get a combination of these things happening year on year.
Can I get a final quick response, sir? This is in many ways the government also outlining what it has done in the last 10 years. They have given their report card before the next elections. What will your report card to the Narendra Modi 10 years be?
I would very clearly say there has been a very positive 10 years, a tremendous amount of